Welcome to Raging Bullets, a comics fan podcast, Season 2, Episode 763. We celebrate 19 years of podcasting.
From the sleepy suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio, there are assembled the world's two greatest podcast hosts, created from the cosmic legends of the universe. Sean Whalen.
Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast. I'm a big fan of variant colors. My love for Batman is that stuff. Let's talk some comics.
And Jim Segulin.
How's it going, eh? You know me and Superman. I'm really loving what they're doing. Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast.
Their mission? To discuss DC comics in books, movies, and television several times a month in 1 to 3 hour episodes. And to serve all mankind.
Outstanding!
Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the Duke of the Sultan of Strategery, the Minister of More Gooder, is known the world over as the Friend of Flashery, which does get him strange looks. And of course, he is the elder statesman of the podcast, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to talk about The Brave and the Bold, issue number 200. Justice League of America, I almost said Super Friends, issue number 200. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Mr. Segulin, what is going on over at DCBService.com?
Well, as we're catching the end of the month, so we still have a little bit left if you missed your April's pre-orders. One of the things I like to do is just throw in the search bar. They've got a great search engine. And this week I happened to put in Batman in the search engine. So I'm looking at some pops. I'm looking at a replica of the Batmobile from Batman Forever. A lot of variant covers. If you're a variant cover hunter, here is a great way for you to find it. Because remember, DCBS is actually a comic shop. So that, just what they post on their current ordering isn't their entire inventory. This gives you a way to search their previous inventory. So thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, they have DC's finest Peacemaker Kill for Peace trade paperback, $39.99 regularly, 55% off, only $17.99. It's a great way to get classic stories if you haven't had a chance to read some of these. The Fable Omnibus Graphic Novel, Volume 7, $22.99 regularly, 45% off, only $12.64. Jimmy Olsen's Super Cyclopedia trade paperback, $12.99 regularly, 50% off, only $6.49. And two different versions of Marvel Masterworks, the West Coast Avengers hardcover. This is $75 regularly, 46% off, only $40.50. I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
You really needed to take that breath and get that extra one in there, right? Just because you didn't want me to have any hearing left.
Exactly.
Let's talk some comics.
Through the magic alchemy of nature's most awesome sources of energy, Ray Palmer, atomic physicist, becomes the atom.
Our first discussion on this episode is going to be of Batman, the Brave and the Bold, issue number 200. We're actually going to be organically talking about a lot of the creative through this, but initially, Mike W. Barr is the writer, Dave Gibbons on art, Gary Martin, pages 1 through 4 for inks, Gibbons and Gaspar on letters, Adrian Roy on colors, and Len Wein is the editor. This is an interesting story because I know I've read this at some point in time. I didn't remember it, though. So it's been a long time. I knew that there was a Brave and the Bold issue that involved the different Batman of two worlds. So that was actually going to be a draw for me right from the get-go. More Batman and a chance to kind of revisit with this. This story read completely fresh to me. I know I've read it, but I didn't remember any of the details. So did you ever read this before?
No. This is very first reading of this. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, here's the thing. Spoiler, I loved all 4 issues, so you're going to hear me gushing about them, but this was my favorite.
No, mine too, yeah.
flat out just, I gotta fully admit, each one has some really cool stuff in it, but this one was the one that, as soon as I read it, I'm like, oh, okay, I can see why Sean picked this one, and I was like, immediately dove in, read it, again and again, and just, diving into some of the nuances of it, and I was just like, this thing was awesome. I loved this story, absolutely. And it was a cool thing for me because, as you said, it's the Batman of two worlds, and in the prologue, they talk about the two different Earths and all that stuff. And then as you dive into the book and you start reading Batman, he read so different. And it was like, oh, this is awesome. I love this. And I'm like, and the more I'm reading it, the more I'm hearing Batman 66 in my head. I'm hearing their voices, the narration comments. I'm hearing the narrator from the TV show. It just, even though I know it's not that universe, but it just, for some reason, it had that feel for me. And I was just like, so that made it even more, more gooder, hearing Batman's voice, being done by Adam West, and I was just like, oh, this is awesome. This is awesome. I'm loving this.
The comics were reflective of the TV show at the time. I mean, that was very much the era that, that's what it looked like. So, like you, I was very much hearing the Batman 66. I picked this, and actually all 4 issues that we're going to be covering as part of this. So, it's 19 years of the podcast, and we figured what we do is take a look at some special anniversary issues of comics, just as a way to celebrate, anniversaries in general. I was looking for things that were done in one, just so that way we could have a complete story and have a complete conversation around them. This was the final issue of Brave and the Bold. This is where they wrapped up the series with issue 200. I didn't realize that I didn't put 2 and 2 together when I was picking it at the time. I just saw 200th issue. Oh, that'd be kind of a fun one to do. And it's Batman and Batman. Why not? Not realizing that, oh, wait, this was actually the finale of the Brave and the Bold, which was cool. But this story was completely embracing the idea of there being multiple Earths. When I like the opening page, where you get to see the 2 Batman there, and the different art style was like, even the boots. If you take a look at Batman's boots, there's so many fine details that are different in the costume.
Yeah.
And I love, there's the different boot, like the boot heel on Batman, whereas we got the flat boot in Batman on the left and the boot heel on the Batman on the right. The costumes have different tweaks. Obviously, the bat symbol is a different tweak. Even the cowl is different. The utility belt has some differences in its details and how it looks. The Batman on the left was very much the Batman I was reading at this time. I absolutely love that. My softest spot for a Batman costume is the Batman on the left, the current Batman as of the time of this Brave and the Bold. There's, and we'll get into that when we get into his portion of the story later. What I love about just the art styling of this one. But Dave Gibbons, I didn't realize Dave Gibbons did a lot of the art chores, or did some decent art chores on this one. Dave Gibbons of Watchmen fame. This is a beautiful book, and we're going to have to talk organically about a lot of the people involved in this one. But it is definitely a gorgeous looking book. The concept of multiple Earths is something that I, as a kid, adored. It was something in the 80s at some point in time, or maybe late 70s even. I first got this idea of, it was that Justice League I told you, the one with George Perez on the artwork. Whenever those issues of Justice League were released, was my first real in-depth foray into the idea that there's 2 teams. There's the Justice Society and there's the Justice League. They're on different parallel Earths that are separated, but there's ways for them to get to the other side. This thing opening up with the idea of there being this Lucian having 2 different versions of him. One is very evil, and the other is just a good guy who is just living a very, very normal life. The date of their birth. At first I was like, are they talking about Batman? Because on the cover, it's obviously the 2 Batman. I'm like, I didn't know we're putting a birth date on it and everything. Then I realized, oh, wait, no, we're talking about the villain of the story. Yeah. And I really liked that this introduced this villain character. But the idea of on a parallel Earth, they are like twins. And there's some connection between the 2 of them. I don't think they don't outwardly realize it until much later in the story that there is some deeper connection between them than we usually see with the people on the parallel Earths. And I thought that was an interesting story premise for this, because we don't see that very often in these. Usually the people on the parallel Earths are, case in their examples, the Green Lanterns, the Flashes, they aren't connected in that way, where they're the same person and they've got like this kind of telepathic or deeper connection between the two of them. These two have that. And I thought it was just an interesting story premise to kick off with it.
Oh, God, yeah. And again, with me and Parallel Earths, back when this first would have come out, that's something that was never really on my radar. I was dealing more with the timey-wimey stuff with the X's and Days of Future Past and this and that. This could affect the future, and just that whole beautiful, wonderful menagerie that was the whole X universe of time affecting, with will the Sentinels be created? Will they not be? Will they, will Jean and, Scott have a kid? Will it be a boy? Will it be a girl? All that was all my dealings with the timey and multiple Earths, even though, again, X has had multiple universes and stuff like that, but that was more of my focus. So again, with stuff like this, this got more introduced in my life later on. So going back, and whenever we get to read some of these early stuff of the two Earths, I really do enjoy diving into it. And I love seeing that back then they were doing it just as heavy as they're doing now. This isn't a new concept, multiple Earths and all that kind of, all that cool comic book stuff that we love that sometimes, freaks people out. I'm always happy when I see the original, some of the earlier artists, the early creators going, no, we're going all in on this. The comic companies say, no, we're all in on multiple universes. Let's have fun with this. It's kind of neat to see that this isn't just a new concept.
What's cool about this character of Brimstone, Nicholas Lucian, this character was created for the story. Even though they're making it seem like this character had a rich history with the classic Batman, as we flip the page and we're really transported to a very classic Batman story. This character was created for this. I actually looked it up because I was like, I don't know this character Brimstone, but man, looks like, there's been multiple entanglements with Batman. Nope, it was here.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, but I really liked that they so enveloped me into the story that I was taking it for granted that this is a reoccurring villain in the Rogues Gallery. And I thought that was a neat touch. It was a neat way of handling this.
Yeah, and I honestly had no idea. Going along into this, I thought he was a regular recurring rogue that I didn't know about. Mm-hmm. I was assuming, this is one of the earlier rogues that for whatever reason they didn't continue him on to my reading period. So I was like, this is kind of neat seeing somebody new, new for me,
Well, that bothered me. I mean, I was considering it bothered me in the sense that, wait, there's a Batman rogue that has reoccurred that I don't know who he is. And I was digging back. I'm like, they can't be. Who is he? Where would he first appear? And that type of thing. And why haven't we been using him now? He was created for this story. And I think this is his first and last appearance. I don't know that he occurred after this. I don't know. Off of that, I was looking on, there was a DC fandom wiki, mm-hmm. and it shows his first and last appearance on Brave and the Bold, but he may have appeared, I could see somebody else using him as a cameo in something, so I don't know that he was exclusive to that. But he certainly was not this reoccurring rogue that we've seen, but he sure feels like the villain of the week for the Batman 66 show, doesn't he? You could see a famous actor playing him?
Yes. Oh, God, yeah. Especially just the way his physical appearance, mm-hmm. It so fits. It would so fit into the 66 with the flowing beard and the hair, spiked up, and he's the devil influence because his name is Lucian. And I'm like, okay, sure, close to Lucifer. So yeah, I get it, and just the whole fire, brimstone, and and I love just, that the physical appearance, the pop of color in this series, talking about, Dave Gibbons, artist, yes, 100% awesome. But, you got to give, and I went back to see Adrian Roy, the colorist, a good tip of the hat as well. Because I love just the way the colors pop on this with, again, when you have a red color It's very easy to make it pop. Just like red and greens, you can make those pop really nice. This one, they did a brilliant job with that. Again, Batman's the hero of the shadows, so you got to have plenty of shadows in Gotham. You got to have a little bit of, stink on the city because that, fits. But this one, they kept it nice and upbeat. And that's why I said the 66 Batman just keeps popping in my head as I'm reading this. And I keep almost saying watching this because it does have a very physical presence to me.
I agree.
And it's, again, kudos to the art team, on how they crafted this. And our last issue, we talked about not using the term non-traditional panels because they've been using it for a long time. And on these pages, you see these are non-traditional panels. So once again, it's been a trick that artists have used for a very long time. It goes into what the comics actually do and how they show fluidity and motion, and just it's absolutely brilliant.
Kudos goes to Mike W. Barr writing on this one because to be able to get that dialogue right and get the tone right in this is really critical because it's got to have the right amount of engaging story while being endearing and not feeling dated, which is really intriguing about this because we're reading this now and it feels definitely like it's out of time. But the storytelling itself as a conceptual story has a lot of depth to it. It does not feel like a dated story. There's a lot going on here. Even though you're dealing with a Batman and Robin who clearly are from a very different era in dialogue. And that part was really an interesting balance to try to achieve. And it actually worked really well reading this all these years later and enjoying it because I'm like, wow, this is really a good story.
Yeah.
Lucian, by the way, even if he did appear later on, the idea was this version of Brimstone was his universe collapsed in Crisis, right? So Dark Crisis brought back the infinite multiverse, and there may be a version of Lucian that exists now, but it wouldn't be this one because of that collapse, was what this wiki is saying that I was looking at. I went to dc.fandom. I said fandom. I want that thing back again. dc.fandom.com. They had a whole thing on this version of Brimstone. If you want to read it further, this is where I'm getting the information from. I just wanted to know a little bit more about the character and if it did have anything beforehand. I did like the journey through like the meat packaging company and getting to see Lucian and his thugs. And how they're kind of like looking at him as a joke. I actually really liked this because that was what gave that sense of there's a history here. Yeah, you've been beaten by Batman multiple times. Like, dude, why would we follow you anymore? I really you don't see thugs doing that very often, right? They just kind of toe back in line and throw on their little outfits and they follow along with the villain, which is very much this era of Batman comics and very much this era of the Batman 66 television show. It was kind of like, oh yeah, there's no problem getting thugs and the thugs are loyal. These guys are laughing at him. I really loved this. I thought it was an interesting way to play this whole thing as they're playing out how Batman and Robin basically just schooled him.
Yes.
And it was great.
Not only schooled them, I love the image they give. They show Robin poking him in the butt with his own, with his own pitchfork.
Yes.
Like that is like just ultimate insult there of adding insult to injury. And I was like, I loved seeing two thugs say, "No, thank you," and they're not only saying no, thank you, they're flat out laughing in his face, saying, "Yeah, if we need a campfire lit, we'll give you a call." It was just like complete insult. And I love the fact that Brimstone's, fires up and, is actually, he's got a little bit more power to him. He's modified. He's done a little augmentation to his stuff, so he's, flares up again. And you start seeing why the thugs are going to follow him. Oh wait. He is a little bit more.
We do need to talk about Robin in this, as we organically go through, because I got some issues with Batman in this story, which I love the story. Don't get me wrong, completely. But it was an interesting observation I had about Robin during this. So I'm glad you're bringing up Robin and kind of poking him, that type of thing. As the story goes on, we'll talk about this because there's some interesting little things I noticed about Robin in this one. But and I'm not saying the writing's fantastic, so it's nothing wrong. It's just more of we'll talk as we get to that.
Yeah, I'm curious now.
But Lucian, is basically saying, hey guys, I've been just sitting around twiddling my thumb. I've got all kinds of different weapons and actually I do like that about the character, that this isn't a villain who rests on his laurels. He's experimenting, coming up with new ways to deal with his enemies. And I really actually like, the fact that he's wowing them with the fact that he's upped his game. The Batmobile in this. I love this era of Batman with the Batmobiles. I've been getting the Corgi miniatures, and I wish I had done more with them. I've got the mid-size ones as well. Corgi made these, it's like the Batmobiles of different eras, and I believe they have one similar to this, and I don't have it. And it's something I really want to seek out because I love this style and the design, with the kind of like the bat symbol on the front and just the big fin on the back of it. It's something where over the years, the different variations they've made of the Batmobile design is something that I just love. I've got like the first Batmobile, which really was like a car. And in the Corgi era, over Christmases, I've got some friends of mine who will get me Christmas gifts. And one of my friends got me a couple of these die-cast metal Corgi Batmobiles. They're super cool because they do stuff. Like if you push the buttons, like little gadgets and weapons and things like that will pop up. And they're worth seeking out and collecting. I'm looking for something close to this version. I think Corgi does make it. But I just love this era. They're sitting down and playing chess together. It's interesting how during the chess thing, Dick Grayson's all into this idea of, let's go ahead and go on this adventure. I'm going to talk about this one. Let me explain it right now where I'm at with Robin on this. Robin is Batman's Achilles heel in this story. When you read this story, you'll see it through. Batman has to keep rescuing Robin at his own expense. Like there isn't a reversal of that. And we'll watch it through in this story. It's really interesting. I'm wondering why, it's almost like, Batman, you're irresponsible taking this kid out with you. I love the story. So it sounds like I'm knocking it. I'm not. I was actually totally engaged in the whole thing. And don't get me wrong, I'm a Batman and Robin guy. So there is the emotional part of it. It's like, Robin's got to be there. Just why? But I would say objectively, if I was sitting there and going as an adult, I don't know. What's a kid doing there? Batman's constantly got to save him from danger. There's multiple times where they're almost killed because of the fact that Robin's there. And we're going to have to talk about that as we get there. Watch. There's multiple occasions where they are thwarted because Robin was on the scene. It's an interesting part of this story. And you get why, because Batman did shelve him a couple of times back in this era. And there were stories around it that were really, really good, where Robin was proving himself and proving that he should be on the team and everything like that, and validly so. But I really enjoyed the fact that in this one, I saw multiple circumstances where I'm like, I don't know, Robin should even be there. I'll point him out when we get to him. But it's a fun part of the story's really fun. So it sounds like I'm knocking it. I'm not. It was just, that was how enthralled I was with the story, that I was picking up little fine details like that. Where I'm like, hey, wait a minute here. If Robin wasn't there, he'd be fine. So it's interesting to watch them. I do like that we get different versions of Commissioner Gordon in this as well. It's not just Batman and Robin. Because of the fact that we're dealing with different Batmans of different Earths, we actually get some of his support team are a different one. So this Commissioner Gordon is a different Commissioner Gordon than we get later in the story than with the other Batman. And we see it in the way that, with the way that their interactions are and things like that. There's just slight nuance differences. And that to me was great writing too, because you're really trying to, in this story, capture very, very different eras.
Oh God, yeah. And again, for me, just when the signal flashes, they go, and just seeing Gordon standing there, them going into the office, and just that interaction, again, had that whole 66 vibe on it. He was part of the police force. In this universe, I could imagine that Batman did have a commission with the police force, and he was a deputized, an official deputy of the Gotham PD, like they had on the TV show. It had a really cool dynamic, and just in a couple pages, you see it. Then later on, you see it again. You keep seeing it. Though it did throw me for a loop about him giving him clues on how to catch him. Because that, again, fits so into the TV show where you're just like, if you didn't do that, you wouldn't have gotten caught.
There were a couple cases where he used the clues to get them there. So I was like, okay. But they were ridiculous logic, which fit the 66 show as well, too. Like, if you put the rings together like that, they all of a sudden make a bullseye. It's like, how did you get to that? But the villain was counting on them to do that in order to show up on the scene. It was his obsession. It was like what the Riddler does, right? It's this obsession with tricking the Batman.
The first one, the archery one, I don't think he thought Batman was going to figure it out, because you go to the scene when they arrive, he's like, Batman and Robin, you figured out my clues? And it's got the question mark after it. It's like, oh, yeah, you figured it out. After that, he's using the riddles to try to lead them into a trap.
Yeah.
This first one, he actually thought he would get away with it. And I'm like, why would you think that? Why would you give them the opportunity to do that?
We're saying the same exact thing.
Okay.
So what we're seeing is that, like, there's times where he's trying to do it as trickery. It's like, why are you even wasting your time with this? Like, why are you even doing that? But then afterwards, he's like using it as like a tool, and we're seeing this exactly the same way. I love it. It's something where it's the ridiculous logic of Batman 66. Because the TV show did that too, and I love it. It's an endearing part of the TV show, and the solutions make no sense sometimes. like you got from here. So putting the rings together made you think of a bullseye, and that led you to this archery tournament.
Right. They both thought of it too, and that was the thing. Robin's like, that can only be one thing. Way ahead of you, chum. They both thought of that. So how the hell do you think of that?
The Robin Hood bit with like Dick Grayson with the archery, I thought was pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
Like, that was a great Robin scene where he was, basically pinning them to the wall. You're really counting on these guys to not have a knee-jerk reaction, though, because he was pinning them down with arrows. And if he missed one of them, like, this could be problematic.
This could be an issue, yeah. Robin commits a, murder. You're like, wait, hold on.
It was interesting how he got away, because of the fact that the fire went up to the sprinkler system and Batman slipped, and then Robin gets knocked out in the back. It was interesting to see the two of them vulnerable.
Yeah.
In those sequences. This was not one of the examples of a Robin scene where I'm like, Robin shouldn't have. I mean, Robin did get taken out there, but so did Batman. So he wasn't the Achilles heel there. It was just kind of a circumstance and distraction. Actually, Batman was more the distraction on that one. Between the two of them.
And that's the thing that did throw me, on how vulnerable Batman was. Because, again, I didn't read a lot from this era, so I didn't know if this was normal. Because, Batman slipping on water is not anything I would ever have said, I would ever have thought would have happened. Because he's Batman. Of course he's going to fight, be able to be he probably trained, for a year on fighting just on slippery surfaces, just so he could not slip, So it's like seeing him slip here and, the villain getting away because of that kind of did throw me for threw me. And when I say threw me, I mean like for like half a second, going, oh, wow. Okay. And then you continue on with the story. It didn't like take anything away, but it was something interesting to see. And that was something I was curious if a more vulnerable Batman occurred in this time period.
Yeah, it's the same as the 66 show.
Okay.
Think about the way that they got thwarted by villains a lot of times with that first.
Okay.
Remember, there's always the 1-2 punch of the first half hour was like them getting into some peril.
Yeah.
And the second half hour was them overtaking the villain. That was very much the formula. In this case, it was a more vulnerable Batman. He wasn't the. I mean, that's saying that he was incompetent. He was much more of the crime fighter. It wasn't uncommon to see him be the detective and do the pieces that they're doing down in the lab and stuff like that. Not to saying that he was a wimp. Sometimes people would get the jump on him from just ridiculous things like this. Circumstantial.
Right. Yeah, no. And that's, again, that was something that I was like, because, again, I'm not an avid reader of this time period. So it did throw me. But it was like, again, it didn't hurt the story or me. I'm not sitting there saying, oh, that's horrible. No, it's just kind of interesting,
So this, I won't say I read every single Batman era issue from this era, but I read a lot. I've referenced on the show multiple times that as a kid, I went and sought out comics a lot of times at flea markets. So you would get beat up copies of Detective Comics, beat up copies of Batman. And they were invariably, most of them were from this era. And so I got pretty close to full runs of comics. I mean, they aren't like mint or anything like that, but they were readable copies in big boxes. And it was an assortment of comics, but I was a Batman junkie, and an X-Men junkie. Spider-Man, certain characters I grabbed first. And so you'd sort through those and be like, "Ooh, wow, I got another issue of Batman," or "I got another detective." And then I'd read them. And so this is very reminiscent of the era. Like, they're not going over the top or anything like that. This is thematically, it feels like that era. And they've done a very, very good job of representing it. Because it's easy to go too far with it and make it seem like it's like too hokey, or try to, you're now exaggerating what was going on in the comics at that time. This is very balanced in that it's got the right level of, this feels like it's from that era of Batman without, like I said, feeling like it's dated. This was a very, very tricky piece to do. And that's why I applaud the writing on this one, because the story's engaging. Everything about it is fun. Like, even the Batcave, I liked the different feel to the Batcave. Even that like crazy Joker symbol on the wall.
Yeah.
The giant penny and the dinosaur and the way that it looks in there. I like that the Batcave feels like a different era Batcave. And it's much more them around chemical tests, these are the things that were common to see them do on the television show. And I keep referencing the television show like it wasn't representative of the comics at the time. All of it had like a synergy to it. The comics were influenced by the TV show and vice versa at the time. This was this era of Batman. So it's very interesting to read this and see. In some ways, the TV show is meant to be a parody of sorts. This is not a parody. This is Batman. It's right. Meant to be him as a costumed adventurer. It's a gentler time, because here's the thing. The two of them got knocked out in this era. The two of them be dead. Yes. In today's comics era. You could get away with getting knocked out in Batman comics back in that day because the villains weren't like going out of their way to like kill people. They wanted to thwart them, not murder them. Which is, the word thwart was widely used during this era. Everyone was out to thwart everybody else and baffle them. And get money.
Yes.
Money was a big driving factor as well. So going back to the waste disposal and seeing Lucian dressed up in costume and trying to do like a holdup at this point, again, he's referencing the fact, I never thought you'd solve my clue. It's great as the two of them, this chemical test that they do. Maybe it's just an ordinary piece of paper, Batman, like from a wastebasket. So they're doing all these chemical tests on an ordinary piece of paper for the end result to be the Gotham Municipal Waste Disposals where they need to go, basically because the clue told them it was trash.
Yes.
I loved this. I thought it was so great. They probably spent hours around that table, like using different chemical tests. We're not getting anywhere, Robin. I mean, it's like, this is just and Robin's kind of like, it's just paper. Yep. By Jove, that's it. It must be trash.
But also, it was because Batman remembered another word for Hades.
Yes.
Was Gehenna, meaning a place where rubbish was continually burned. So that's why he knew to go to waste disposal, because he remembered that. I'm like, okay. Yes. But now, the one thing I don't get, and maybe you figured it out,
mm-hmm.
What were they stealing there? What was this solely to kill them, or because there's like a payroll?
It's an armored car, so they're stealing the money.
But why is the payroll at the waste disposal? It doesn't make that.
Well, because I'm assuming it's a business and they've got to turn in their payroll like everybody else, right?
Yeah, but.
So they're dressed as security guards trying to get. Listen. You're overthinking this.
I know. I'm big time overthinking this, but again,
but I'm guessing just because they're.
I'm like,
I don't know what payroll looks like.
It's not a high cash thing, you know. Yeah. It's not a good, you know.
But it's not an electronic, like we're used to electronic funds and all that kind of thing. I'm assuming that like this is an era where we're assuming that the waste disposal company has a safe, and they have to turn in their vast earnings as a waste disposal company to the armored car. Lucian and his gang is there to intercept the armored car.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Maybe back then this was a more cash intensive business than the one I'm used to dealing with. And I'll be honest with you, if that's the case and this is a cash intensive business, then this would be a smart attack, because who would ever think to go to rob a waste disposal facility? So that's actually, I'm going to turn my comments around and say this was a very smart move on his part, you know, because apparently in this era, in this time period, this was cash focus. So if it's a cash-focused business, you hit it, you know. And who would think to hit waste disposal, unless, of course, you gave Batman a clue to find you. So once again, dude, come on, man, you would have gotten away with more money if you had just not given Batman a clue as to where you are.
Now, this is my first example of Robin being the deadweight.
Yeah.
Okay. And I love Robin. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying that. And I'm a huge Dick Grayson fan. I'm a huge Batman fan from this era. This was my era that brought me into comics, and I grew up loving this era. I still love this era. But they go and they split up, right? Split up, but be careful. Lucian knocks this kid out. He's ready to burn him. This allows Lucian to get away. So if Robin hadn't been there, Batman probably would have caught the guy. This would have been all over. It's example number one of Robin being the Achilles heel in this particular story arc. By the way, I love Robin in this story, so I'm saying that, but I found it funny as I was going through, and you know, Batman rescues him. I like that we've got to go get a better smelling suit.
Yeah,
but this was very much. Like, you could almost hear, you know, the narrator from the Batman 66 show, well, Robin, be burnt to a crisp.
Yes. Oh, God, yeah. 100% was hearing that. And, again, just the voiceover for, for both, Batman and Robin, you're hearing it. Yes. But the one thing I love on that final, after the page afterwards, after Batman swoops in, saves, and you have a nice, as you comment, a nice little funny line. I loved Lucian's turn there.
Yes.
We're starting to now get a more sinister version of it. It's no longer enough to confound and defeat Batman. No, there's only one way for me to regain my lost status. Batman must die. And I love just the close-up on his face and just everything of, really just saying, okay, we've got an evil villain now. This isn't just a, confounded Batman, you've caught me again. No, this is, I am going to kill you, Batman. And I loved seeing that.
Yeah, I do too. I thought it was a great turn for him as a villain. I like that he built up to this, because we're very used to be the kindler, gentler villains in this era. But this is a guy now who has been looked foolish multiple times. He's frustrated by what's happening. He's already been made fun of by his lackeys. And actually, this makes a ton of sense here. He's being aggressive to basically remind them who's in charge, and you better not make me mad right now. Yeah. So I kind of got the whole, this is where the story I felt like was escalating in a way that I thought was really engaging, because it didn't just leave him being the fool. So then a package arrives, and it's another, fighting lure bait. And I love how they use this one to figure out, again, Helgramite. The insect larvae known as Helgramite, which led them to the Gotham Bait Company.
Because that's the only bait shop that sells that larvae that's a type of bait. So It had to be that one.
Again, this is where now the twist is taken. And this is what I loved about this. Lucian starts using it. He's like, Batman's going to figure out the clue. It's I'm gonna send him this really... So I actually really liked this clue, because Lucian was using it to say, okay, twice this guy thwarted me by figuring out my clues. Let's just use it. Let's make sure that he's going to know exactly where we're going to be, but I don't want it to be obvious. So he puts together this clever clue that you'd have to figure out if you were Batman. And even Gordon's calling him amazing, because of the fact that he figured out this clue. I really like this story turn here where Lucian's learning from this. And it actually took on a level of depth here that I thought was really, really interesting. This is Robin being an Achilles heel twice.
Yes.
Because he gets captured here, and this forces Batman to surrender. And this is, again, not the kind... This is a Lucian who is going to fill Robin full of lead. I have no doubt this guy was absolutely 100% going to shoot him if Batman didn't, play ball.
Right.
Yes, the idea was to capture Batman and take his utility belt and all that kind of stuff. But this led to Batman being put in this trap that wouldn't have happened if Robin wasn't there. And don't get me wrong, I love Robin being there.
Yeah, I know.
But again, I actually loved in this story that as the story was going on, I'm like, dude, at some point in time, the kid's been knocked out multiple times. He was knocked out in the first event. He was almost burned to a crisp in the second event. He's held at gunpoint here where you've got to now surrender yourself due to him being there. I could see why there were stories coming out of this where Batman's like, I got to put you on the shelf. And they did this in the comics at that time. There was a logic to hey, I don't know that you should be running around with me. It's a little bit dangerous for you. I really like that did not get ignored in the comics. They actually did stories around this. But this death trap was really interesting because he threw Batman in a trap that he thought there was no way for him to be able to get out. Again, this is twisted Batman logic, but I love the fine art details. I didn't notice it in my first read through that he was by those bags.
Yeah, me neither.
Second time through when I was reading it, I'm like, oh, that is so cool that the bags were there. I didn't notice them the first time through. I like attention to detail. And there was artistic attention to detail here that I thought was, fit the whole story and what was going on. That part was there for the illogic sometimes of the solutions to this. Batman just happened to know I need to grab this, what happens to be in these bags, in order to be able to then rip off a pipe that's down here in order to escape from myself. I loved it. I loved every little bit of how this all played out, because it is very much a Batman escape that you would have seen in the 66 show, and it worked really well. Again, not knocking the comics of this time. It's similar to you, my experience with this Batman started first with the 66 show and went to the comics afterwards. So there's going to be people listening to this potentially who were reading the comics first. And if you are and you're screaming at them, just understand the reference point is just reversed maybe to yours.
One of the things I loved about this was, again, everything, because I remembered those bags being there, but I didn't remember seeing Batman standing in front of them.
Yeah.
Now, I remember earlier them being in there. So later on in the issue, when Batman explains how he gets out, I remember those. When I went through my second read through, that's when I saw him saying, oh, that's when he's standing there. Oh, that is so cool. And again, we're talking about Robin being a liability and all that stuff. It goes back to, for me, with Dr. Evil, with Austin Powers, when they've got him captured, and Scotty's like, let's just shoot him. I've got a gun in my room. We go shoot. No, we have to use this elaborate trap. And I'm like, and right now I'm Scotty just yelling at him, dude, you got him tied up. You got the kid tied up. Put a bullet in each of them. Call it a day. But again, as I'm yelling at, I love that they did this, and how they did this, and how the explanation, and you get how he gets out of the trap and all that stuff. It fits, comic book reading. It fits the story being told, and again, it fits so much like 66 that I was like, I loved it, and I was like, yes, but part of me does, always yell at the pages, going, dude, you got a gun to his head. As soon as Batman's tied up, pull the trigger. Done. No more Robin. When Batman goes, oh no, what'd you do? Put 2 in Batman. Done. End of story. You win.
I love that. I love that he's got but he's got to die in my death pit.
Yes,
because it's got to fit the whole Brimstone theme, right? So it's it's got to be the showman, all those pieces. I like that Batman, when he's slumped down, there is a logic to all of this. We see him rip out the pipe, which Lucian explains, hey, it's only going to increase the lava flow. What's this fool doing? But I like when he's slumped down, that's when he's making the bomb. And Lucian doesn't see what he's doing because he's slumped down like that and making the bomb. I loved that piece. That was when he was... Everything that he tells us later that he did, you can see that he was doing in that panel, in that moment. Everything has like a precursor to it where you can go back and actually see it. This is great storytelling.
Oh, God, yeah. And here's the funny thing, you know me, sometimes I got to point stuff out. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the metal, nozzles that they're using.
Yeah.
Would have melted by the lava. You need stone. That's why the rest of the thing of stone is okay, or some form of fire repellent type of thing that we see later on. Okay, but metal melts in lava immediately because it's so much hotter than what metal is. So the metal lava nozzles that he's saying would just simply, as soon as the lava hit it, would just melt away, and they wouldn't be actually there anymore.
Well, but it's not actual, like, he's burning something to make lava, right? Because I mean, it's not like this is tapping into a volcano.
I don't know.
See, I had a logic to this one. I actually agree with you on the melting thing. I think that's why he was able to take that thing off by hand, because of the fact that it was melted. You know what I'm saying? Like where now all of a sudden it's easier to rip that pipe off. You might disagree with me on this one. I'm throwing my logic on this. I actually am agreeing with everything you're saying. I guess when he was saying lava, and I'm putting lava in quotes, it's not like this was tapped into a volcano. He's simulating lava, right?
Right.
So I guess I was taking it as, is it possible that like this stuff's really hot, but hasn't quite hit the molten level yet?
Yeah, I have no idea what is actually. They called it lava. That's why I was saying lava. If it's just some melting, extremely hot thing, okay, cool. But again, it's nothing that ruin the show, ruin the story, or anything negative. It's just one of those things it's just like notice and comment on.
I actually like the conversation, because I actually think so I think it's us talking through. Is there a potential logic to this? I guess I was wondering, is this something that was gradually heating up versus being, fully at lava level? Because I can't, like, where they're at, like, Gotham doesn't have a volcano,
right. So
he's got to be pulling lava from some form of simulated method. It's not like he imported lava.
Right. Well, yeah. That's where is he getting the lava from? Is this just some form of molten liquid that's extremely hot?
Well, they deliver it just like the security came up with the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything's delivered in this Gotham. You can get lava if you know the right people.
Yep. Now, the other thing I did like, the fact that he put the mirror at the top so he could watch it from a distance and wouldn't have to be sitting down over it. Mm-hmm. Again, it explains why he wasn't right in the room initially, because in that room initially, that would be very uncomfortable, if not dangerous, for him to watch him die. So he put the mirror up there so he could watch him die and enjoy the view from the safety of the other room. So again, little stuff like that on the story details, I like that they add that in there and they give us why he's doing it.
But it also plays into the design later on.
Exactly.
Because he goes back and corrects the design later on, under quotes. But it also shows that he would need then still a way to watch it. It allowed Batman, we'll get to that piece, but it sets up the whole scenario for later on. So the initial design actually is a precursor to the later design and the different escape method. So because future Batman or Earth 1 Batman can't do what Earth 2 Batman did. So it's really interesting to see the explosion and the fight and everything that happened there. I really liked the whole play out of this. There was so much of it that was really cool. The Robin thing that I was laughing about, it was never it didn't ruin the story for me. I just found it funny that I'm like, what was the benefit of having Robin there?
Well, we see in the end though that it's Robin who switches the phosphorus capsules with simple heartburn pills.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, so Robin did play a part in there. So there's a kudos to Robin. And
yes.
Again,
Jim, you nailed it. Actually, here's the thing. If Robin hadn't been there, Batman would likely be dead. Because he threw the cat, or Lucian would have escaped at the very least and be able to walk. Really, Batman's brutal to him at the end of this. When he punches him and knocks him in the... I mean, it was accidental, but he paralyzes the guy.
Yes.
The kinder, gentler Batman 66 paralyzed a man.
Yeah. And I liked how, again, it was funny. I didn't notice him hitting because they put the clunk in there.
Yeah.
So he hits his head on his own stand there. And you can kind of see in the next panel, there's a little bit of a red trace to it. So they really show he cracked his head on that metal stand.
Yeah.
And again, it was kind of a neat how all this plays out going on in the next story, because I didn't notice those two little details until my second read through because after I'd already flipped the page and we had the interlude in 1983 where we see the second part of the story.
I want to apologize to Robin, because you're right. With him switching the capsules, instantly, he needed to be there. So I apologize completely to Robin.
There you go.
I feel very bad right now.
And you should.
I should. I do. I actually do. I'm a big.
So here's the thing: if Robin was here, he'd probably say it's okay. He'd be all right with you. Yeah, you learn from your mistakes.
I do,
and that's the most important part.
This is a period of growth.
Yes.
The interlude was great because we get to see more of the traditional Dave Gibbons art. Just this whole little interlude story with what was happening, where years later, now Lucian's being revived, ready to go after his enemy, Batman, only to find out that while he was out, Batman died.
Yeah.
And I love it. There's a Joker telling him. This is very much, I loved the differences between Earth 1 and Earth 2. And it was something in my comic book reading. It was funny, you were mentioning the X-Men stories with Days of Future Past and stuff like that. Some of this stuff is very reminiscent of that. So it is the multiverse. So I was reading both. It was interesting to enjoy, and honestly, my exposure to the multiverse, because when I jumped on the X-Men, I jumped onto that Belasco issue. So then I went back and got those issues, Days of the Future Past and stuff like that, over a short period of time. It was over a period of a year. I was really, that was an era where I was selling comics to get comics.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because I'm I want to read. It was very much reading the story. After I was done, I would make sure I read everything. And then it was wait, there's an X-Men story I missed that I'm let me go back and find it. And the quest for comics back in this era was something, both DC and Marvel, when there was a story that explained something, I was a fish on a hook. I'm I've got to read that story, be able to reread it and all of those pieces. So I would go back and seek those things out. There's some not parallels, but I mean, there's some interesting synergy, I think, between what Marvel and DC were both exploring with the idea of timey-wimey stuff and parallel worlds and what was going on. Because really, Days of the Future Past was an example of a story where it was dealing with parallel timelines. Because the idea in that X-Men story was that, without going too crazy into it, they wanted to prevent that future from happening.
Right.
Which now you've got a future that did happen, but has been thwarted. And in this case, you've got a parallel Earth that our Earth isn't really parallel to, because of the fact that our Lucian was a good guy. But this Batman Dead storyline was really interesting, where his hatred of Batman and the deep level of hatred actually tapped him into this twin of his that ends up existing, to the point where he's able to go into that guy's mind and take over. It was such a cool story. This idea that we're going over to the twin now and explaining what he was, because when you see the cover of this one, you naturally think it's going to be Batman teaming up with Batman. No, it is actually Lucian teaming up with Lucian.
Yes.
And that was something that was really incredibly interesting in this.
And again, I loved how, again, we're showing passage of time, just physically on how they gray up, they gray up Lucian, they age Joker, but also just passage of time on how the violent nature of the book. It goes from the happy-go-lucky Batman that we had before to a bomber blowing up a church, then blowing up the Hispanic Society. Massive death going on here. Just in the first couple pages of riots and explosions and all types of chaos. I loved how we did have that massive shift, from just the happy-go-lucky to the extreme violence. It was kind of a neat, it was a neat shock to the system in reading this. And that was something that I loved about the book was, because again, we have an artistic art style kind of change. It's not as much pop, not as much reminiscences of the 66 era now. Now we're getting gritty. Now we're getting nasty. Now we're getting body counts that are like, oh my God, innocent people are dying. So we're back to our Earth, the Earth we're used to. Okay.
I like, though, that the logic of this is you mentioned the change in Lucian in the past. You see how that Lucian could be this Lucian now.
Yes.
It's the same guy. He's taken over the body of the good Lucian from Earth 1. I like that this isn't just some jarring jump to being the kind of guy that would do this. This is a man who's thriving on hate. He hates Batman now. We saw the change. We saw the twist. We saw him waken to, like, I can't destroy this guy because he's already dead, which is something we've seen in the comics. I actually love that this is an example of continuity being a cool thing. We saw the death of the Earth 2 Batman in comics, and this is reflecting that storyline has happened. So you know where this is at placement-wise in continuity. Then we get this. It was beautiful, beautiful artwork. And the shift to the more modern Commissioner Gordon, the one that we were more used to seeing on Earth 1 at this point in time in the story. And again, the story being a little bit more reflective of a very different era. These aren't kinder, simpler times. We're seeing more depth to the response to this. We got rioters and looters taking place. This is a Gotham that is a much darker location. And you've got 3 different leaders of groups that have been targeted by this bombing that are trying to take a stand. The whole goal here is try to prevent another incident from happening, causing complete chaos in Gotham. And I like Gordon's like, I put my best man on it. And we get to see Batman. I adore this version of Batman because this is the one where I was getting a little older. I was much more suited to be reading comics and really getting a lot out of them. And I absolutely love the styling of this Batman because I had been reading comics before this, so this wasn't the starting point of me reading comics, but it was what I needed out of reading in general. I was reading novels. I was reading comics. I was becoming a reading freak. I loved reading. And to be reading Batman comics where we were starting to get this level of depth to this Batman was something that was really, really cool for me. I love revisiting this because he is the Caped Crusader. He is the Caped Avenger. He is the Adventurer. He's all of those pieces. Bruce Wayne has a little bit of a swagger to him. And you see him, he's like building relationships, but they keep going wrong. I love that her name was Clarice, too. I don't know why. Yeah. It just kind of made me think of Silence of the Lambs. Clarice. Yeah. I don't know why that just kind of went there. Kind of interesting with it being a Hell on Earth storyline that we've got a Clarice in it. But I thought that was kind of a clever part of the storyline. But this was something that the depth of this was something really, really strong for me. Seeing this Batman go and swing out, though. The next page, Jim, where we see him with that cape flowing over his shoulders, I've always loved this version of the Bat costume.
Yeah.
I forgot how much I loved it when I saw it, just the way it flows over the shoulders. There was something that's really cool about this style. It's one of my, and I think it's just because it was a pivotal point in my life of Batman reading, that I was reading Batman monthly. I was reading this guy. And Mike W. Barr was actually the writer of quite a bit of the stuff that I really was enjoying during that point in time. This look is really a real sharp look for Batman. I think it's a cool costume.
Oh, 100% agree with you. And I loved the note this time. Instead of a thing to try to lure Batman to a trap or anything, don't want money, only Gotham's death. Just wanted you to know. I'm like, oh man, he really has gone over the edge now.
Well, and he's talking to him like they're old enemies.
Yes.
And they're not. And I really liked that. Like that isn't dropped in the storyline. For Brimstone, this is a continuation of what he was doing. For Batman, this is a first exposure to Brimstone. I loved, and for Gordon too. I like for them that there's a duality, and Gordon's seeing the danger of this. I know you do your best, but this time I wonder if even that will be enough. Setting the tone of danger for this one. This is a escalated Brimstone. Batman has no history with, and I liked that aspect of the story. Talk about different Batcaves, and I love any time we get to see Alfred.
Yes, I do miss Alfred.
Yeah, Alfred in this is fantastic, because this is a Batman who was not operating with Robin. This was very much a solo Batman, and Alfred was his confidant, his sidekick, some ways a mentor. He took care of him. Even the nourishment piece is an interesting part of this. Batman, Master Bruce, I prepared some nourishment for you. This is a Batman who was very driven. This is a good time to be reading this story, because we're going to be doing soon Lonely Place of Dying. And this is a Batman who is doing that. He's so driven. He's not eating. He's not taking care of himself. He's rushing out into danger. These are subtle little pieces that do play into that storyline that we've got coming up. So I didn't intentionally grab this, knowing that it was going to, in some ways, lead us into that. But this storyline does in a very good way. So we get to see the Lucian Chemical Company. And I like this is again a version of him that was very successful in his own right, because he's just a good guy who's a successful businessman, a successful entrepreneur who has his own companies, is just doing a good thing. But now this Lucian he's going back to his old ways, but he has resources available to him. And I like that in going in this world and taking over the other one, he's staying in the shadows, introducing himself as Brimstone, using thugs to start taking out Batman, is knowing that Batman is going to get through them. So he was actually planning this to be a multi-staged attack with Batman. It was kind of an interesting way for a villain to be feeling him out. I loved the combat sequences here. We got to see Batman going up against the numbers and just seeing the way, this is the Batman that you were talking about earlier. This is the Batman that's been trained.
Yeah.
There's a different fighting style of this Batman than what we saw in the first story. I actually really liked the duality of there being some differences between the Earth 1 and the Earth 2 Batman that were clearly defined in the storytelling, clearly defined in the art, clearly defined in the combat. And I love both of them for very different reasons. And this was fantastic to see this. It's a well-crafted story because it highlighted everything you said earlier right here. You see the differences distinctively. That first Batman would not be fighting these guys in the same way.
No, not at all. And again, brilliant usage on the artwork to show the fluidity, to show the motion, to show the combat, to show the action, all of that playing out in a couple pages. I loved how this guy was so much different than earlier. Because again, we have a much different Earth. And even the inner dialogue he's going through where he's talking about how Lucian's talking like we're old enemies, but I've never felt this guy before. I don't know who this guy is. And I love how he's recognizing that these demons that he's fighting are tough, but they're just a gang out there. This guy doesn't plan on using them to stop him. He's got other things in mind for this.
Yeah. And it's absolutely fantastic. This story is incredibly well handled. I love that this is where Lucian's saying some crazy things. Perhaps, Batman, but my demons are wasting your precious time. That you cannot replace, as I well know. He doesn't know. Batman doesn't understand that he's talking about time. The time passes that Lucian lost. Yeah. Batman has no idea what this guy's talking about. I loved that piece. I thought that was a great attention to detail. There's Lucian's speaking from his own context, And Batman has no idea. He's talking to Batman like Batman should be super familiar with him. And Batman doesn't know these pieces. I thought that was a great storytelling element. Added some depth to this. Because I thought it was smart. That Lucian's that crazy that he's talking to this man like he's the same man, but we know he's not. And Lucian's not actually the same guy. He has invaded his twin's body. So in a very different Earth. For Lucian, there's a fluidity to all of this from the beginning of the story straight on through to now. But for everybody else around him, there isn't that. And I just thought that was really, really good in all of this.
Well, I was going to say, I loved, again, we have the old Lucian affecting the new Lucian who had to leave a clue. Again, the clue is a trap. And again, Batman figuring out just based on, Greek dictionary, knowing the Hellenic club and all that going in there. I loved, again, this usage of the clues as a trap. But I also loved how Lucian actually captured them because he ground the Hellborn flower to such a fine level that it can go through the nose filters that Batman's wearing.
Yeah.
That for me was a great thing. And even Bruce is like, hey, no, the air is drugged, but I'm wearing, and then he falls. And he realizes it's just a little bit too late that something's wrong. And he thought he's covered because of his filters. Like, oh, no, I've got that figured out. So, again, I love the fact that we do have a villain who is smart enough to pull one on Batman. And Batman was prepared for it, but not prepared to the level of the ambush that Lucian had set up for him.
Yeah, and that was something that I thought was really interesting. Setting the stage for the repeat of the death trap.
Yeah.
But this time he set up, I love this, where is he finding all this lava?
Yeah, I don't know where he's getting this from. What is this,
Because I don't know. I haven't looked online for it, but I don't think you can get lava delivered.
Okay, here's the thing I'm wondering. Mm-hmm. Lava rock, that's out there that's in landscaping stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you superheat it, it turns back into lava.
Okay.
I think. I'm not 100% certain on this, so don't quote me on it. But right. I'm pretty sure if you put that in a kiln, get it superheated, it will become the molten lava again. Because that's what that lava rock is. It's
So how much lava rock does he have? Well,
if he's able to fill up, I'm assuming that looks to be at least maybe a 10 by 10 room.
Yes.
10 by 10 room, that's what? 20, maybe 30 feet tall? Right. That's a lot. I'm not going to do the math because I'm not good at math, but that's a lot. Yeah.
So he's more gooder at math than you are.
He's much more gooder at math than I am.
It's interesting though. That's gathering a lot of lava rock because here's the thing: you look stupid if you ran out of lava. So he's got to have extra, right? So it's. I actually really love the whole trap on this one. He's basically thought he's covered everything between the gas, making it hard to breathe, and being able to break the pipes and those type of pieces. He thought of everything, this time around to try to avoid that situation, except for the fact that Batman somehow would be able to turn a piece of the insulation into a surfboard. So he rips off part of the wall and turns it into a bat surfboard.
Yes. Dude, I absolutely love that.
I did too.
That was absolutely brilliant. And by the way, 3,000 cubic feet is how much lava he would need to fill a 10 by 10 room that's 20 feet high.
Where did you pull this from?
I just pulled out my calculator while we were talking. 3,000 feet for 10 by 10, 30 feet high.
I didn't know if you had immediate access to Henchman Fan Club. It's
no.
Hey, any of you guys ever had any experience with trying to kill a hero via lava?
Yeah, so that's how much he would need. Now, how much does that incorporate in product? I have no idea, but that's the cubic feet he would need of lava rock. So assuming the melting of the lava rock would decrease on the volume because there's going to be some artificial, whenever you burn something, there's always a slag. So he's going to have some lava slag. So he'd probably want to go about 5,000 cubic feet of lava rock just to make sure he's got enough.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Yeah. So the whole thing worked really well. I liked the camera. again, going back to the mirror, the camera ended up being a way to help him get out.
Yes.
The whole thing worked really well. I like he's like, no, not again. This being the quest for, he was going to blow up Gotham afterwards. You're right. Why didn't he just shoot him?
Yeah. Again, it goes back to the why not just, Now, I do like the fact that he's got, a double setup there where it's the people who are going to go on live are going to get blown up. So it's going to be a double payday.
Yeah.
So Bruce had to not only save himself, but then save the people who didn't realize they were also going to die. So it was kind of a neat little, again, I like the villain. Again, it's the classic villain issue where they've got to pull one over on Batman. If they would just get rid of that thing, they would have won because he knocked Bruce out. He was out cold. All you had to do is walk up to him, bam, shoot him once, done.
So here's the question I've got. It doesn't matter if you're Earth 1 or Earth 2 Batman. Like, it seems to be your finishing move is paralyzing people, or attempting to paralyze people, because in this case it's an attempt to paralyze him. He throws him out again by slamming him against the corner of what looks like the monitor, the TV monitor at the end. Like, what is up with that?
Well, again, this Batman's a little bit harder.
Sure.
So he is actually going for the hurt. He's putting the hurt on the guy.
Right.
Now I do like the fact that, when he does bump him, that frees this Lucian.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, what's going on here? I'm not, how did I get here? I have no idea what's going on here. I was a prison in my own mind. And, I love the fact that Batman's like, his tone is totally sincere, but and he's betting his life that he's not faking. So again, we've got the Batman who's able to read the person and understand and going, let's just make sure, let's see what's going on here, And again, this is also Batman who's probably dealt with these kind of weird, timey-wimey, multiple Earth type of stuff. So I do like how that ended, and even later on, they prove. He goes through the most sophisticated lie detector test, to really verify, yes, he actually was not in control of himself. So it is kind of neat.
Yeah, that got him back out into public again.
Yeah.
But, which I don't think in real life they would let a bomber back out with the most sophisticated lie detector tests.
Yeah.
Hey, it wasn't me.
Yes, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. That is the most popular defense that criminals use, by the way. Wasn't me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's constantly, again, especially like, in the financial crimes that I've dealt with, bank robberies and whatnot, that's always like, oh, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
But
like, here's a picture of you doing it. It wasn't me. That wasn't me.
But I was going to say, doesn't evidence trump that?
Yes, and that's why they usually go to jail.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, here, I'll throw out a thing. One of the bank robberies that I worked, the guy's defense wasn't me, and the teller that he, had a gun to her head, sat there and described in great detail a neck tattoo along the back of his neck. Now, throughout the entire trial, this guy's wearing a long sleeve, a high collared shirt, with the tie. So they're like, sir, will you please stand up and lower the back of your collar? He drops the collar exactly how the teller described it. I mean, she did a perfect description of this neck tattoo, and he drops his collar to the jury, and the look of hatred across the entire jury panel was awesome. It was like the greatest testimony ever I'd ever seen a teller do. She completely was the nail in the coffin for the guy. And as soon as he dropped the collar, his defense attorney's like, Your Honor, can we talk? Let's talk a plea deal. He immediately gave up his not guilty defense of wasn't me to let's try to minimize what happens to my guy. He completely knew they lost. So again, just little side note.
I love this epilogue for Lucian from Earth 2.
Yeah.
Like, how horrible. Do you think this is some sort of side effect of the coma, Dr. Lincoln? I don't know, Warden. His brain readings are perfectly normal again. But now he's totally paralyzed. Can you keep him alive, Doctor? Why are we asking this question? 4 years, Warden. There's no reason why he shouldn't live out his natural lifespan. Poor fellow. I'd rather die than live through the hell he's going through now. Like, what what are we doing here?
Yes. And there's a single tear rolling down his eye. You know, so he is completely conscious on what's going on in his life and what he's dealing with. And it's just like, oh man, it's horrible.
It is a horrid ending.
And again, this is a horrible person who killed a lot of innocent people. So on one hand, you're like, yeah, serves him right. But on the other hand, they're just like, damn, that's just nasty.
The best part is, I love the ending with Batman with the whole Lucian piece over there. I don't suppose I'll ever really know what went on. I only know that I feel like I faced the greatest challenge and I won. And he swings off from this. I absolutely adore everything about this ending because it's like sitting here, oh, well, I don't know what was going to happen here. This guy's going to go off. There was mass bombings and things like that. Oh, but he didn't do it. So I guess everything's okay now. I mean, what? What?
Yeah, no, man.
And I love it. I absolutely loved this story, but there's so much, like what I'm saying, like that ending. I'm like, wait, what? Why are we okay with this? I do love that this had this cool in memoriam to the Brave and the Bold, from 1955 to 1983. I didn't intentionally know that this was going to be the last Brave and the Bold story that we were doing. And that part was really interesting. And then, flip the page and you get this cute little Batmite storyline that were, quick little comic strip, which I was a Batmite geek back in the day when he was on the cartoon.
Yeah.
Did you watch that Batman cartoon where Batmite was on it?
No, actually, I did not.
You never saw that?
No.
Really?
Or if I did, I don't remember it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there was a Saturday morning Batman cartoon with Batman and Robin and Batmite that was on there.
Yes, I do not remember a Batman and Robin and Batmite.
Yeah, Adam West and Burt Ward were the voices.
Oh, crud. I really don't remember that.
Yeah. It was cool. Yeah, this was cool. And then during the time, actually, they have a preview of Batman and the Outsiders, but the book had already been in print at this point, so it was meant to just be kind of an introduction to leading people into reading.
Well, that was something I wanted to ask you about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is this the beginning, the very first of Batman and the Outsiders, or were there previous versions of Batman and the Outsiders?
No, that was the beginning. They were like 3 issues in, I think, at the time this came out, from what I was reading. In parallel, and I was reading Batman and the Outsiders at this time. I was not so I did read this issue of Brave and the Bold. I'm almost positive I picked it up at the time when it came out because I was reading Batman and the Outsiders when it came out. I was drawn to that. I remember that Batman and the Outsiders was already out when this came out. And I was reading that. I really loved Batman and the Outsiders. That was the first. It was kind of he was in Justice League and then left Justice League for his own team. This was a Batman who was putting his own squad together. And this was the early days of Batman and the Outsiders. This was the first go around.
Oh, cool. Because it was funny because I read the preview. I'm like, oh, let me just continue reading this because it just seemed interesting, and I was like, I wonder if this is like this is the beginning of it. They used Brave and the Bold to launch it or stuff. And again, I've read a lot of Batman and the Outsiders stories. Never this team. I didn't even know who Halo was. I'll be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, Halo. Who's that? Because at first when she powers up, and I'm like, who's that? Then she says her name. It's Halo, and I'm like, okay, who's Halo? And I'm like, now,
that's a great book.
She's got cool powers, So this is definitely now on my list of stuff I've got to read. But and again, that's one of the neat things about the app that I can go back and I can easily find these things when I see something. I'm like, oh, let me add that to the list of books I'm going to look up and start reading. This first run of Batman and the Outsiders is now on the list just because I want to see this. I want to see where this goes and whatnot. It seems kind of cool.
We should do that in the show down the road. Okay. I'd love to do Batman and the Outsiders.
Heck yeah, I'm down with it.
Yeah. Just look at before we jump into our Justice League book. I'm in the DC app right now, and one of the books that popped up that's an old favorite. Have you read the new Secret Six?
I have not gotten to it yet.
It's very good.
Oh, nice. Okay.
There's a brand new Secret Six book out there, and it's very, very good. So just more of a shout out to anybody listening on this one that it's definitely worth checking out. So it's sitting in the app right now. Well, why don't we jump into some Justice League?
Okay.
Look at those strange little beetles. They look... Great neutron!
Our next discussion is going to be of Justice League of America 200. Jerry Conway on script, George Perez and Brett Breeding on art. We'll talk more about art organically as we go through. Roy Thomas was the technical advisor, John Costanza letterer, Carl Gafford, a colorist, and Len Weed, editor extraordinaire. This is a big story, encompassing a lot. Actually, the wraparound cover kind of says it all when you get to see the entire team. So what we're dealing with here is there's the current version of the team who is meeting up with the classic version of the team because of the way that this big 72-page anniversary issue comes about. So it's a supersized issue. And it kicks off right in the beginning with this classic storyline of the Justice League collecting these meteors. And it's an interesting sort of opening to this piece.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Hold on, Sean. Mm-hmm. We are overskipped. You commented on, but we need to delve deeper on this cover. Because this cover has one of the greatest moments I've ever seen on a comic book cover. And that is Superman kicking Hawkman's butt. I'm like, thank you for immortalizing this issue. I am going to find this, frame it, put it up on my wall just so we can see how easily Superman is just busting up Hawkman. So thank you to the creative team who are geniuses.
I want to remind you, this is a Superman under mind control. So it isn't actually Superman that's doing it. We happen to know from the issue. I actually read the issue. If you get a chance to get around to it, you may want to. This is a Superman again under mind control. This was not Superman who beat Hawkman.
It is still Superman.
And by the way, I want you to know right now, you set yourself up. I'm going to point out how easily Superman was schooled throughout this issue, because that's actually the reality of the story. So the cover does not tell the story on the inside. Actually, to your point about the cover, though, it is such a beautiful cover. Yeah. I love the wraparound cover, and if you get a chance to really look at this and appreciate what's going on with it, even the Flash like speeding, I love when they have that speeding pattern. Yes. That follows behind him. It is a star-studded cast. Actually, the nice part about the cover, the wraparound cover also mentions some of the other creative contributions that are in there, and I'll shout them out right now. Jim Aparo, Terry Austin, Brian Boland, Brett Breeding, Pat Broderick, Jerry Conway, Frank. It's Giacoia, Dick Giordano, Carmine Infantino, Gil Kane, Joe Kubert, and George Perez are all involved in this story. Because of the fact that the different chapters actually have different art teams representative of the story that's being told. This definitely feels like an epic anniversary issue in the story that's being told here.
And adding to the comment you made about Flash, I love the streak across, but I love the fact that he punches Ralph Dibny, and it's his head just elongs from one cover over into the other one. I thought that was a neat little, nice little artistic choice.
Yes, yeah. I love when they play around with covers and get a chance to use that rich canvas to do that type of thing. Comic art is something that throughout the eras is something it's nice to see just different artists, different sensibilities and what they get to play with. Also, when you get to see an artist have fun with comics, right? That's something that's really interesting. So then we get this Once Upon a Time, again, reflecting on the fact that some of what you see on the cover is part of a fairy tale, which I thought was a great introduction into this story that you get to see with the Justice League. But they give you this history, which is really a nice setting point as far as there was different meteors, and each meteor led to these different elemental-style creatures that were attempting to take over the Earth. And each member of the Justice League had to work to try and take one of them down. There was another stone that was turning them into trees, which was, such a Justice League story. Yes.
Yes. Now, here's the thing. Did this actually occur, or is this one of those things where they made up this part of the story for the second part of the story?
So it's so funny. My first answer to you is going to be yes, it occurred. But this was collected in a book called Justice League of America, The Greatest Stories Ever Told. Those initial pages. So I think I read it there first, because when I look at the original appearances of the Justice League, going back to the Brave and the Bold, which was the Starro, the Conqueror story, their first issue of Justice League did not have this story. I don't know that this story occurred elsewhere. I think that this was meant to be a origin for the purpose of building to this story. I kept thinking, I'm like, well, I know I've read this before. I did, but I think I read it in that Greatest Stories Ever Told, because I had that book. So I'm guessing that it was created for this. And that's why my initial answer was going to be very different to you. But I started looking back just to see what were the initial issues of the Justice League like. Now, wait, I'm going back to... So Justice League of America number 9 did have the Meteor story. Oh, it is. Yeah, Justice League. So I'm sorry, I go back. It is Justice League of America, Volume 1, Number 9, February 1962 is this story. This is Revealed at Last, the origin of the Justice League. So it's a Gardner Fox story. Mike Sikowski on pencils. Julie Schwartz was the editor back at the time. This was the origin of the Justice League. It happens in that issue. So yes, it was going back to an original Justice League story, but it did not actually appear till issue 9 of the series. That's cool.
Okay. Oh, cool. And it's funny, I'm looking at the cover for issue 9, and it shows them turning into trees.
And the meteor there in the middle.
Yeah. That is cool. Okay, so it is true. Good. Awesome.
Yeah, I like that. So I was right. This was collected. These pages were collected, but I didn't realize it did reference back to issue number 9. I want to read that issue now. And I'm sure it's going to be on, I'm hoping it's on our app right here. I'll have to check after this episode. But that was an interesting little origin story that kind of quickly talked about how the Justice League escaped from this peril. Because they were being turned into trees, and then it was tapping into the Green Lantern ring that allowed John's Martian head to be brought out of there, which then pushed the tree into Diana, and the ring helped her free her lasso, and then they were able to escape. I actually liked the teamwork aspect of it, which plays into this story quite a bit. It's how they're stronger when they're working together and acting as a team. The Batman-Superman battle at the end, where they were teamed up together. Superman was being taken down quickly by the kryptonite meteor that was down there. And if it wasn't for Batman swooping in with his bat jet and taking the meteor away, Superman would have been toast. But really appreciated the Batman's handling of that sequence as far as that piece goes. Again, Hawkman couldn't be bothered with these kind of petty crimes. That's why he wasn't in the original team handling this, because he was actually doing real work. But
well, this time, wait, hold on. This time was Hawkman. Was he an archaeologist? Was he a space cop? Which version of Hawkman are we dealing with at this point in time?
When you have got that many, here's the thing: you like to read these heroes that just can only handle one job at a time. Whereas Hawkman's doing everything else that the rest of the heroes can't do. And that's really, Hawkman is the can-do hero of the DC universe. Let's just be honest with that. And it's one of those pieces. So on the cover, how did Superman get the jump on him? Because the guy's busy. Let's be honest. Superman's like a reporter when he wants to be. Whereas like Hawkman's giving him the stories to report on because he's actually doing stuff. That's what it is. I mean, that's the DC universe in a nutshell. No, actually, the Superman Batman team up I thought was really, really cool in the beginning, and I actually am very anxious to read issue number 9 now, jumping out of this, because I'd like to read the story that led into this. That page where we get to see at the bottom the team standing there, I loved. We got to see Wonder Woman's classic outfit, because there is the reference later that she's wearing a different outfit. It's nice to see the heroes looking this way in part 1 of the story, so that way later on when we reflect back to them, we get to see them in a very different way because of the fact that there's a memory loss component to it. Yes. I thought this opening was really, really important to show that they separated the meteors, they took care of basically cleaning up the whole piece and making sure that in their minds there was no way for this this group to reform and to try and take over the Earth again. They'd done their job as far as they were concerned. Flash forwards to today, A League Divided. This version of the Watchtower was really, really slick.
Oh, God, yeah. I always like the satellites, the Justice League and the satellite. It fits more to what they're doing than any ground base. Now, I will always geek out at the Hall of Justice.
Yes.
100% will always get a pop from me. But for some reason, I really like the idea and the concept of going with a satellite.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's this one, the other versions, future versions, whatnot, you name it, I'm down with the Justice League operating out of a satellite, having somebody always on monitor duty, you know, all the different heroes rotating on monitor duty. I like that idea and that notion of the Justice League. It fits so well for them, and it's one of those things I do like, you know, and I also liked on this opening page how we have the roll call, where, again, we're talking the original team and the new members. You know, and then they even list special appearances by, so they have right there a listing of all the different heroes right there on the opening page. This, for me, is a great 2-page spread.
My favorite DC stories and Marvel stories, when they have teams like this that are Avengers and Justice League, when they do those roll call pages, I always love them because of the fact that there is a rotating cast that can every so often join. The special appearances by Green Arrow, Adam Strange, and the Phantom Stranger was something that was welcome here. I remember this era of Justice League vividly because I was reading Justice League. When I say I was reading it, I would grab an issue here and there and always loved it. When back in those days, I didn't have like this unlimited monthly comic book budget. It's never really been unlimited. Anytime I got a chance to read Justice League because they were my favorite DC heroes, collecting together, that was something that was cool. This era was an example of one where when you're reading it, you were getting members of the team like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman weren't always prominently featured. It was the current squad that they were showing in the roll call. They had the original team, and then they had the new members of the team. There were issues where you'd read the new members of the team, and it did not feature the Trinity at all. That part was always interesting for me. Firestorm was a character, when he came on the scene, I was instantly fascinated by. It's just a cool look. When that character was created, it added a different flair. He looked powerful. I liked the duality, of him. Ronnie was us. The Professor was like, his mentor. I loved the Shazam television show as a kid. The idea of like him having what Billy Batson had with Mentor on that, it was something I always really enjoyed about this character. So Firestorm, when he was on Watchtower duty, we got to see the art switch. The art switches in this were really good. Like when we flipped to chapter 1, it was something about these chapter breaks being where they switched the art made it work for me. And in some cases, it was a significant art change because of the fact that it's just a little bit of a different art styles, but never like so jarring that it ruined the story. It was just the opposite. It was like this chapter has this art, and it was kind of a celebration versus it being something that took me out of it. I don't know. That was my experience, though. What was it like for you when you were switching to like chapter 1? Now we've got a different art team.
I wouldn't say jarring. It is noticeable. And it's one of those things where I was like, because of that opening page that had all the different art teams on there, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that they're giving everybody a different, run at it, and we're telling the different stories with the different art teams. Again, if this would happen every single book, it would throw me off, and I would be like, oh, I don't like this. But because, again, it's, this anniversary and this special, I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of neat. That was kind of a good thing for me to just tell the different story and let everybody do their thing. Now, the one thing that was, I will say, initially jarring to me, and I had to think through this before it wasn't jarring anymore, was the fact that Firestorm had no idea who Martian Manhunter was. That was the initial thing. Like, why wouldn't he know who that's the Martian Manhunter? Everybody knows who that is. But then it dawned on me, like, wait, this is Ronnie. Ronnie's not the sharpest, he's not the sharpest crayon in the box. He is, the professor is the intelligence. He's the physical side. And I'm like, okay, I can see why Ronnie wouldn't know who the prior Justice League was. He's more focused on his team, what he does. And so that kind of like, after I initially got over that, and then later on when Professor explains to him who it was, I'm like, okay, see, yeah, that's, so the initial jarringness was over immediately. Well, relatively over immediately when I started thinking about who Ronnie is.
He's also new. Like new to the hero business and all of that. So this isn't a Ronnie that's like heavily established. This is a very much a newer Ronnie, new to the whole superhero game, in a universe that is ripe with heroes. So you can see how really it's the equivalent of knowing every police officer. Do you know what I mean? It's you know that there's more heroes out there, but do you know all of them? I don't know that you do. You know the ones that are like covering your region. And then
I get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're bringing up an excellent point. This isn't me, like, stomping on your point. It's more of building off of it. You're right. The professor would be much more versed and would be done, like, a lot more research into, like, especially as they got powers. Like, let's kind of learn. Like, even the professor didn't know who Martian Manhunter was. Although, I would imagine the professor, an alien being a part of the Justice League, would be something very much on his radar.
Yes.
Like that would have been something. I don't know that he needed to do extra research for that. He probably already had that in his Rolodex of information.
I 100% think that. I 100% think that he knew immediately who that was and all that stuff. And just, again, there's a point in time when to bring it up and when to comment on it. Because this really did, you think about it, it hit immediately. Everything's going. He's, the professor's doing what the professor does with analyzing the stuff. He figured out it's the flame and the heat that's affecting Martian Manhunter. I loved seeing this combo team of these two working together. And I do like the fact that Ronnie keeps talking to him and other people around him are like, who's he talking to? Who's he talking to? I do enjoy that aspect of Firestorm. I'm not as deep red on Firestorm as I know you are, but he's one of those characters that I always like, man, it's kind of a neat guy. I wish he was around more. I wish they brought him back, found a way to really utilize him. I loved when they used him in Flash. I loved it when they pulled him into, they pull him into other medias and whatnot. It's kind of neat, seeing him in here. He's a good character and a good person for us to link with.
Are you reading current Justice League?
I have not pulled it up yet. Is he in it?
So the current Justice League, I don't want to spoil too much for you. The current Justice League is set up a lot more like, it's almost like this era plus, if that makes sense. They embrace the idea of these everybody's in the Justice League. If that makes any sense, the Justice League is the top of the pyramid. Everybody else is kind of like an offshoot of the Justice League. So people who were reservists before are just members.
Nice.
So it's not uncommon in the current Justice League book to have different squads doing different things.
See, I like that.
Yes.
I like that 100%. That is a cool usage of the team. And again, cool usage of the heroes. And it's a good spin-off of what happened last time with the with the absolute power problems that they had.
Right. So where it plays into your question with this, it's also a great way to spotlight characters, and be able to say, hey, for this mission, wouldn't it be great to have this character be a part of it? Yeah. So they've allowed themselves a lot of freedom with that. It's a good book, a really, really good book. If you're listening to this and you haven't read the new Justice League, I really am enjoying the whole premise behind it. It's an example of logically spinning out of absolute power for that. One little geek out I got to do here. Sorry. No, we're good.
Okay, so the Justice League satellite is 22,300 miles above Earth. Now, traditionally, that is the height. There's been multiple Justice Leagues, and they will throw out that number. And that's like been something they throw in the lore. It's kind of like the use of 52, the 22,300 miles. But, in my head, I was like, sitting there, I'm like, where is that? So I started looking. Like the International Space Station is only 250 miles above Earth. Mm-hmm. The moon is 230 238,000 miles from Earth. So it's a neat little location where it's not in the traditional where we would have our normal satellites. It's not as far out as the moon. It's actually a really neat location. I don't know who came up with that height, if they just threw it out of nowhere or if they actually pulled it in for some reason. But it just, again, it was on that 2-page spread of the satellite. And when I saw that, it got me thinking, because I know how high the International Space Station was, and that's what threw me. But again, it's a neat little science-y thing that it would fit. The height that they're saying would actually fit for a satellite. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I love geeky stuff like that.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had to throw it out.
No. We were talking earlier about the satellite, and I referred to it as the Watchtower. It's actually not. This was the precursor to the Watchtower. The idea behind the satellite era, I love, when you mentioned the geek out of the Hall of Justice, what they did with the Hall of Justice in some of the most recent storytelling over the years was the idea that the Hall of Justice was a hub where they would transport to the satellite and kind of incorporated the best of both worlds into what they were doing with this. That part was something that I always geeked out over. The Firestorm situation with him being such a new hero and kind of trying to figure out his powers, I liked that the two of them were constantly using each other's skill set. You know, Ronnie being more of a sportsman and the professor being more of the brain. They kind of complement each other when they're working together organically. And at their best, you get to see situations like this where, you know, hey, seal that before the air escapes. And I like that Ronnie was already thinking of that, you know, those type of pieces, because the Martian Manhunter poked a hole in the place.
Yes.
And I love that Firestorm team, when they work together, are actually quite effective. I always liked Firestorm. It was just a different sort of character. I think the costume's wicked cool. And Jamal Igle did a real good revamp of it. I've actually got it sitting on my wall. I'm looking at it right now. It is a costume that is easy to like adapt and modify and modernize, and it looks cool in like every era. This is an example of a really well designed hero. I keep acting like Firestorm is such a new character. He's not. He's been around since the 80s. That's a long time for a character to be around, and
being around since the 80s is not a long time.
For a character. I said for a character. Well, you're a character, too. And you were around since the 70s, and you're a character.
I know. Yeah. That's why I'm saying the 80s is not a long time. I've been a lot longer. Come on.
But he's a well-established character at this point in time. I love these early eras with him, where we're kind of... in this story, it fits really well to have him being the introduction of this. Chapter 1 with him being on monitor duty makes a lot of sense. It is one of those things where it seems to be, you know, you're a newbie on the Justice League when you're put on monitor duty.
Yes. You got to earn your stripes, and I get that. And again, I like that concept. Mm-hmm. You know, and I would even be cool if they started like having people that they had vetted, full-time occupants of the satellite. People that they vetted, that they know we can trust this person on the satellite, even though they're not a superhero. You know, I think that would be another neat little concept.
You mean like a snapper car?
Yep, that's where I was going.
They've done that though. I mean, that's why I was referring to that. He was kind of that type of character. Yeah. I think they moved away from, snapper. Well, we got him back in this one, but they moved away from that in the interest of bringing in a hero. Actually, it'd be funny next episode when we talk about Avengers. You know, you're talking about like a Jarvis, right? Yes. I mean, having that type of character in there, and that always I think works. Snapper Carr was like the Jarvis of the Justice League for a while there. This battle between the two of them was really great because they don't know each other. Like, I love Martian Manhunters coming in there, and we don't know what's happened here. I mean, the introductory story kind of gives you some kind of hint what's going on. But I didn't at any point in time think this wasn't the real Martian Manhunter. I thought it was him. I was just wondering what was going on with him that this was happening. He really is going all out, though, because he's picking up, like, trophy cases and trying to smash Firestorm with them, which that's something that's consistent throughout this. The hypnotized heroes are actually a lot more violent and ruthless than we're used to seeing with them.
They don't have their compassion. They don't have they're focused on the single mission at a time. It's, I must do this. I must do this. There's no, oh, I don't want to hurt somebody. It's no, they're in my way. Get out of my way. You know, and I again, that was something that you don't catch until as you start reading later on throughout the issue. I loved how this right from jump gets you thinking, you know, what's going on with Manhunter? Because like you, I didn't think this was a fake Manhunter. I knew this was the actual Martian Manhunter, but I didn't know what was going on with him because, you know, he hits him with the case, rips up part of the floor, throws it through him. The fact that he flew through the satellite, you know, through the wall of the satellite, had no regards to letting the air out and killing possibly anybody inside. You know, I loved seeing that level of, you know, on the Martian Manhunter.
Yeah, that's something that I find that's incredibly interesting. The idea also of Firestorm recognizing that, hey, this guy's afraid of fire.
Yeah.
You know, and I like that he and the professor worked this out, that the visual of Firestorm was something that was disturbing to Martian Manhunter because of the flames coming out of the head. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah.
Then the Martian Manhunter explaining it as Firestorm was using fire as the threat, you know, setting the trophy case on fire. Then Martian Manhunter, not being a seasoned veteran and having gone through this before, recognized there's a sprinkler system there. So, you know, there on Earth, there is a defense. It's water. He's explaining the difference between Mars and Earth, and that this is a guy who's been on Earth and knows what that looks like. I thought that was really, really a very, very cool wrap-up to that particular battle. Firestorm was overtaken by somebody who's just more seasoned, and everything about that worked. When the Justice League shows up on the scene, we get to see who the current team is. And I really liked the introduction. I loved this squad because this is one I was reading Justice League during the time that this squad was in there. I liked the satellite era quite a bit. And it was cool to see, you know, Elongated Man. These were characters who I didn't know, except for Green Arrow. Green Arrow was kind of my linchpin character. Even at the time when I was a kid, admittedly, my love for Hawkman came later. It was really the Jeff Johns JSA that kind of brought it all together. I read Hawkworld and liked all of that, the Space Cop through Hawkworld. That particular, when DC was doing that as a prestige format, and then it led into a Hawkman series. I read that and enjoyed it, but the real love came when, like, Johns was like, there's some problems with Hawkman.
Yes.
You know, with the particular, just different versions. Let's find a way to put all of this together. And I was just so glued to the return of Hawkman and JSA. It made me go back and read a lot of Hawkman, and, you know, including Shadow War and things like that we ended up doing on this podcast, straight on through to, you know, now I love this character.
Yeah.
But at this time, I liked Hawkman. I just hadn't read a lot of Hawkman other than when he was on Team Books. Green Arrow, though, was a character who I always loved as a kid. I had the action figure, the Mego action figure, was actually my introduction to Green Arrow. I had the action figure first. And remember, he was on Super Friends?
Yes.
So I had the action figure before Super Friends. So I had read him in comics in Batman backup stories and just was really glued. I always loved Robin Hood as a kid. Remember there was that Robin Hood TV show?
Yes.
So,
oh, yeah. I was huge into Robin Hood, big time, you know, and again, part of it comes from, you know, Dungeons and Dragons love that, you know, had growing up. So you got an archer, you know, just that whole, the Arthurian legends, Robin Hood legends, all that kind of medieval knights. That was my jam when I was a little kid, you know, the Hobbit series, all of that, you name it. I was so heavy into that. So, you know, Green Arrow was also, I knew exactly who Green Arrow was. I liked the trick arrows. I thought that was cool. I didn't read a lot of Green Arrow, so I didn't know the whole thing about Ollie Queen, about him and Black Canary. All of those neat stuff that I now know, I didn't know back as a kid. I just knew he was an archer who shot some trick arrows, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I thought that was a neat little, you know, neat thing.
My two linchpins on this squad when we're looking at it was really Green Arrow and Firestorm. Because I had gotten interested in Firestorm. I'd read a couple issues of Firestorm and really had gotten into this new character, but Green Arrow was my guy. And it was, I remember in preschool, because, you and I are the same age, so it would have been the same thing. I remember playing Robin Hood. I went to Hope Nursery School, which was, down 260th. And I remember there was this inside, there was like a playground inside there, where you remember the poles you could slide down and stuff like that?
Yes.
I remember vividly playing Robin Hood. I'm trying to remember who I was playing with. I don't know if I was just, myself imagining playing Robin, or I'm sure I was playing with other kids, but it was so long ago, I don't remember the when. I just remember I was having a good old time playing Robin Hood. But that's where, by the time this came around, which was years later, I got a chance to really be a fan of Green Arrow and seeing him in there. These street level Batman type guys were my jam. Yes. And this team, though, is a great lineup. Zatanna in that particular outfit, that was my Zatanna. I remember reading her that way. And just this whole team with Adam and everybody, this was kind of my introduction to a lot of these characters, was the Satellite era of the League. Green Arrow kind of being this really reluctant member of the team. Because he left the team because he wanted to be a loner and go off on his own. This is very much the foundation work of the Green Arrow you and I did so much of on the show during our DC era of the show when the Team Arrow was going. Yes. It's the time where Ollie gets very frustrating. Ollie is a great team player when he lets himself be. And when he's Ollie being Ollie, a lot of times that gets in the way. And I really loved everything about how this reminded me of, these are the foundational pieces. This is before Longbow Hunters. It's before any of that stuff. But foundationally, this is who Ollie Queen was back at that time. When they reimagined him, and I would put quotes around that, they pulled the best elements of him and brought that into the modern era with Green Arrow. I really love this team kind of analyzing what's going on. This was a great setup for how these team members would be going up against individual members of the original team and why they would be going up against them, eventually leading to a team up. This is the kind of stuff I loved. It's funny doing Brave and the Bold first. Brave and the Bold is typically a hero team up book, or sometimes you get the battle between them first. This is a great example of the battle first, then the team up.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of times the battle first and then the team up sometimes does annoy me because I'm like, dude, you're a hero. What are you doing? But they did a brilliant job in explaining why there's the battle first. With them not having the memory, with them, being under the influence of the stones, which, we're going to get to in a minute or so. But, and again, that's a tried and true method that a lot of stories have told. So I'm like, it's a good way, but it is we do get some solid stories leading up, and there's an explanation on it. And I love, as the story evolves, these heroes start figuring out what's going on. Because this is the Justice League. They can't just be an also ran, we need somebody in there, filler. No, these are actually heroes. And I do love that they do have an intelligence. They do have a strategy to them, that there is something that they're doing with this. And I like seeing these heroes, and I like seeing that. And again, it's funny. When this first came out, I was not reading Justice League at all. I only know of these characters because of the podcast, how we went back. Like, my love for Elongated Man came from, the worst moments of his life, and I just like, Ralph, when he lost his wife and everything that happened, with Identity Crisis. That story, just was absolutely brilliant. And I loved that story so much that introduced my love for Ralph, but also was my introduction to Ray, the Palmer, so I was like, it's kind of funny that going back to this, I know these characters, but I know them years from now, their character years from now, but how solid it is that I'm comfortable with who they are based on what I know.
Did you watch a lot of Super Friends?
I did watch a lot of Super Friends, but I'll be honest, I don't remember Elongated Man ever on there.
Let me explain where I'm going. Okay. Yeah, let me explain where I'm going with this. Did you watch that Plastic Man with Baby Plastic cartoon?
Yes.
Okay. So I remember we're actually completely, there's a synergy here on this piece. So I'm kind of setting the stage for this. That was kind of our exposure to like a stretchy DC character was Plastic Man. I kept wondering, like, why wasn't Plastic Man in this as a kid? And then as I got more into the story, I got to know more how Elongated Man was different and grew to love the character. I'm with you that later storytelling where I got to read Elongated Man more consistently and start realizing who Ralph really was made me appreciate the character even more.
Yeah.
He's a character who I really grew to dig, but initially I was kind of like, is he Plastic Man light? Like, why aren't we always using Plastic Man? What's going on here? I was never like a big Elongated Man fan until I got to read a few issues with him where he was spotlighted, and then I'm like, oh, he's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And it took a while. I really do think there should be an intruder alert that lets you know when Snapper Carr is coming on your station.
Yes.
Because then you got a question like, do we really want to greet him? Like, who is snapping and stuff like that? I love the character of Snapper Carr now. He was one back in the day. I remember when Snapper Carr would come on the scene. I'm like, why this dude? I get him now, and I really like him now. But there were periods of time where I get why they wrote him out. Him coming back for this anniversary was terrific. This was really a good use for him. Him basically saying, hey, there was the all-call going on here, so I figured I'd pop up and see if there was some way I could help out. I actually really like that about him. He fits that role you were talking about earlier where, like a trusted civilian, what makes somebody graduate to being a trusted civilian? It's this. Snapper Carr showed up. That part I thought was really well written. And it's something back when I read, like back in this era, I would not have appreciated this about Snapper Carr. I do now. Like, yes. Dude showed up. Like, that's cool.
Well, and I like the fact that because it's the triple priority alarm, the triple priority signal that triggered his old signal device.
Yeah.
So it's not even the current one. That's why Snapper got it. And they talked to earlier pages where, Ronnie's like, I'm going to do the triple priority. It's the highest level. We need, every and anybody around to know it's coming. If they're not here, that means they're dead. And I love the fact that that's why he set the signal at the highest level possible, and that's why Snapper got it, and that's why Snapper's there. So, with you, I'm all in on having Snapper be there. And I chuckled, with the snapping because that does crack me up where he does that, and even later on, it's brought up again the snapping. So, but I love how. This is a hero who's there. He's not a hero in costume, but he is somebody who says, hey, if you need me, I got you. What do you need me to do?
How about monitoring the satellite so we can take Firestorm with us? I question Oliver Queen in all of this one. Like, what is he? So Ollie knows who Snapper is, right?
Yeah.
Knows what he brings to the table. Let's be honest. Snapper Carr at this point in time has established himself as being useful. So what we're going to do is Firestorm's power levels, right? We're going to keep him on the shelf when we're going up against the originals. And they're trying to stop their old friends from gathering these together. Why on earth would you leave Firestorm there when you've got Snapper Carr to man the station? Like, why? Why would you do that? I'm questioning Ollie's judgment on this. Like, Firestorm, you stick behind with Snapper because we need two people sitting there. Huh? Like, I don't know. Like, isn't that a button push to call everyone back? Like, I don't know. I don't get why. That was a choice that Ollie made. It was a bad leadership decision from Ollie Queen.
Yes. Now, because Ollie's not the leader of the Justice League. Who is in this era? I
don't know.
Yes, I don't think they have a leader. They have a reluctant leader.
And clearly Ollie took over. Like, I know. Everyone's like deferring to the guy who's visiting, which was kind of interesting because the guy literally he's the one who's kind of taking charge. Like, they're walking down the hallway, Ollie's in the lead. They're sitting around the table looking at the map. He's the one doing all the talking. So,
and he had all the information on. Again, it was neat usage of him because of his longevity with the team. He had the information on the meteors and the first league case and all that kind of stuff. He knew what that meteorite that was snatched up. he had that info. So again, I liked how I liked the usage of it, and I'm not arguing with you that I disagree with Ollie's call. I would have had Firestorm go with one of the team as well. Probably I would say the Superman team send Firestorm as well, but just again, I don't know. It's later on we do learn that having Firestorm there does save Red Tornado. So it turned out it was a good call on Ollie's part, but initially looking at the facts here, I agree with you. Bad call leaving them behind.
The interesting part of this story with this is an era where Ollie and Hawkman now have become more friends. Because remember, we've dealt with Satellite stories before where the two of them were butting heads.
Yeah.
It's this now, the two of them have become friends during this time, and it's actually nice to see that evolution of them and see them together, at a time where they are more friendly with each other. It's not always the two of them fighting with each other. Those two, you can see them being antagonists for each other even when they are buddies. But it's interesting to see that switch. The Phantom Stranger's role in this was really interesting. Like, they brought him in as a guest. It's Aquaman versus Red Tornado, and the Phantom Stranger, there is the typical observer that you see in the Phantom Stranger's own series. And he's watching this. First of all, I love the artwork. This is some of my favorite DC arc. Was Jim Aparo. I always butcher his last name. As a kid, it was Jim Aparo. That was my own pronunciation of it back in the day when you didn't get a chance to meet creators. I've heard Jim Aparo is a pronunciation too. I don't know what the correct one is. So admittedly, for anyone out there that's screaming as I'm clearly butchering the name one way or the other, or there may be some third version, this is an artist I adore. So it's one of the reasons why I'm even prefacing it with that. This was my Batman artist. Really, most of my Batman reading was this artist. So anytime I get a chance to see this artist doing anything, his Aquaman is absolutely fantastic. This is a journey back to the best of my childhood when I get to see this artwork. This is coming home, reading these particular pages and seeing what's going on here. This storyline with Aquaman is really terrific. He's searching out for one of the meteors. And then Red Tornado shows up on the scene, and it was great to see the two of them together. Here's what's smart about doing an anniversary issue like this. If you're looking for engagement to get new readers onto the series, showing your top-tiered characters interacting with some of the newer characters, lesser-known characters, B and C-list characters, as a way to go, here's why you should think this character's cool. Aquaman versus Red Tornado is a great example of that. Seeing these two together really was a great spotlight of both. This was very good scenes.
Oh, God, yeah. And you talk about artwork, and as you were talking, I was just nodding my head along. That one page where they're face-to-face, and he's like, Red Tornado's like, just what we feared. You're not in your own control of your own, what forces control you? And he's trying to reason with him. And then you look up, and you can see, the Phantom Stranger just staring down on it. This page right here is absolutely brilliant. I love the look of this page, and then you go right into the action. One punch knocks him into the water, takes him down deep. Because again, that's one of Aquaman's tricks to take we saw when they were first telling the story. That's how Aquaman defeated the first Crystal villain. He took him down into the depths. And it would have gotten Red Tornado, but he's got that gut check. He's got that hero in him where you see him go, rise up because of the orphan, whose life he once saved, who still, still loves him, and is the woman that he cherishes. All this stuff, that he's like, he's got this, the hero in him rises up, and I love just seeing him come flying out. That's a brilliant looking page of him. He's got the determined, ready to take down, Aquaman. And he's struck down by the Phantom Stranger. And I was like, what? Wait, Phantom Stranger doesn't act. He strikes people. What? And I loved seeing that because that really just had me going, what the heck just happened? And I love these pages because of that mystery of why did he just do that?
This is why teams like the Justice League need that balance, though, of not just your top-tier characters who have solo books, but you also need characters like Red Tornado as a part of it, because when you've got a team book and somebody's got an unfolding story in a solo book, you don't want them to be contradictory. So a lot of times you're limited as far as the character growth you can do on the team book with the characters, because of the fact that a lot of that character growth is going on under the control of the writer of the solo series, unless they're doing both. So if you're a writer and you're writing Justice League, having characters like Red Tornado where you're able to have an emotional arc like this, like, I know who Red Tornado is from this. You know, yeah, he's a robot, but he's got a soul, he's got a heart, he's got a family. It's an adopted family, you know, and a woman who clearly is like a wife to him, a kid who has become like an adopted kid to him. You know, he can't have kids of his own. In this era, this robot is able to adopt a child and do it was really cool. Like, I really loved that page. I thought it told a lot of story. The Phantom Stranger added a great mystery there. I kept thinking he was going to appear later. No, he was pretty much content. Like, I've stopped Red Tornado now. I've done my piece. I'm going to step away. Which I thought was so interesting. Like, this is like, if the original Justice League does not do what it's going to do, this is a problem. But he's like, I'm going to do my piece and just hope that everything turns out okay. Yes. I thought that was fascinating off of this, and walk away. Because you're right. He's a guy who doesn't interfere. The curse of the Phantom Stranger that he's talking about, it actually does make sense with him because of the fact that he is not an agent for interfering. So the little push that he gave was pretty much the limits of what he can do because he's meant to be an observer. That worked out really well. It was an interesting choice to have him in there, but brings back the rich history of characters like that in Justice League and in the DC universe as a whole at this time. He's always an enigma. Anytime we get his appearances, there's something I think he's better served being that character. And it worked really well in this.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that I don't know a lot about. And there was the one Justice League story where they kind of went into his past and explained who he truly is in reality. And I always loved that story. I'm not going to say anything because I don't know if it's still canon. I don't want to throw off any surprises, but there is that one story that break down who the Phantom Stranger is. I always thought that was a really cool explanation as to who he is, why he does what he does. So he's a character that when I saw him in here again, I was surprised to see the shock. But I did like that later on, the reason Red Tornado is back at the satellite is because of the Phantom Stranger. Yeah. Not only did the Phantom Stranger take him out, but then he transported him to the satellite so Firestorm could hook him up to the automatic systems to repair him. So it was a neat little, usage of the character just to get it a little bit in there. And even, I like somewhere a stranger is smiling. His job is done.
The interesting piece of this too is it shows what you said earlier, why Firestorm being there was a good thing instead of, I needed, because this is something Snapper could not have done on his own.
Yeah, Snapper would not have known what to do with Phantom. And Ronnie didn't even really know what to do. It was the professor saying, okay, get him in there. There's the automatic system. Hook him up to that. That will do the rest. You're good to go now. And again, it's the Firestorm, professor. It's the Ronnie professor team up that makes Firestorm.
Talk about a ruthless battle. This is Zatanna versus Wonder Woman.
Oh,
battle.
Yeah.
Really, really good. And I love that Dick Giordano does the artwork on this one because this just feels very classic in its presentation. And I really love Diana's ready to grab the meteor when Zatanna walks in. And I like the using of her. I did go through every time Zatanna casts a spell throughout this storyline. And they did a lot of spells in this one. Yes. And they were pretty detailed spells. I read backwards every single spell in this. I felt like I was doing homework. It was really well done, the way that they used the spells and her specificity in the spells. I thought that part was, I don't always see that in Zatanna's storytelling, where you get so specific and so detailed in the spell that she's crafting. This did a really good job of kind of expanding my understanding of how detailed Zatanna could be in what she's doing. I really love the backwards magic in this. It was really well done.
Here's the thing. I love the backwards magic, but it always does annoy me because I got to read it backwards, and I'm like, and it throws me off. There's been some of the words that she threw out there. I will admit I had to take a scratch pad, write it backwards, and like, oh, okay, that's what she's saying. Like, because at first I'm like, what is that? What's that word? Hold on, wait. And I actually had to write down the letters in reverse order just to say, oh, okay, that's what it is.
Do you want to know a good trick to that?
The mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a mirror handy, okay?
Yeah. So just hold it up in front of a mirror. It works really well. I used to do that as a kid with the comics. Like when it was, then I'm going back to my childhood. It was, my mother had like a lot of handheld mirrors, back in the day. So I used to grab one of those when I was reading any form of story with Zatanna in it, and I would hold the mirror up to it. It's a weird thing to do because you kind of got to hold the book sort of sideways or completely upside down while you've got the mirror under it. The sideways seems to work a little better just because, it's a little more organic. You pick up the mirror, hold it sideways, then continue on with your reading. It just, there is an art to reading Zatanna if you're using a mirror. I recommend a handheld mirror because you don't want to stand in the bathroom the whole time.
Well, I've got my black mirror, the cell phone when you don't have and I could do it that way and read it that way. Mm-hmm. But again, it's still like the overwhelm the Amazon, but harm her not.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's still, though, you still got to figure out how to, it's kind of like Bizarro speak, where you got to figure out, okay, where is the correct order on how to read this? Because, like, you can't read it traditionally. You have to read it still in the reverse order, but the words I can see, but it's still not, so it is it still is a trial for me, even with the mirror.
Diana went for the kill shot.
Yes, she did.
When she threw that slab, I mean, that was a kill shot that she was throwing there. I really like that this is, when you're hypnotized to that level, these characters were throwing kill shots left and right. And this is a really interesting story showing the danger of a Wonder Woman unchecked.
Yes. Well, any of the heroes unchecked.
Yeah.
We're seeing, just again, but Wonder Woman specifically, because she is a warrior. And that's something I always love to see. You get... you do see some really cool combat stuff with her. And it adds on why her being such an agent of peace is so important to Wonder Woman. She really holds back a lot. You always talk about Superman holding back his punches because of he could actually kill somebody if he's not. Wonder Woman's the same thing. She doesn't have that same superhuman level of strength that Superman has, but she's got the knowledge on how to kill someone very effectively. She is a killer. She can do the deed. She's had that kind of training. So it's kind of neat to see, a story where she's not holding back and the hero really has to gut check and rise up to it to the point where Wonder Woman takes her down and hops in the plane and leaves, and Zatanna's left lying in some rubble. If it wasn't for the Amazons, Zatanna would be gone.
I like that her mom recognizes that an evil force is controlling Diana's mind.
Yeah.
Her mom would know her daughter and that type of thing. She's trying to, rationalize the whole thing. That part was pretty important as far as knowing her daughter and knowing that she wouldn't just do this. So the healing of the Purple Ray, being the thing that ended up saving Zatanna, was something that was super cool, as far as explaining how Diana could be this forceful, but yet the hero would still survive this whole thing. It added like real danger to this in all the right ways. Green Lantern versus the Atom, where we get Gil Kane.
Yeah.
That's another beautiful art story. This becomes a celebration of DC, right? And a celebration of just classic artists having an opportunity to touch this story. This is something, I'm glad we did this, because when I picked the issue, I didn't realize all of the artists that were involved. It really is a celebration of just amazing talent. If you haven't read a lot of classic stories, let's say you're newer to the DC universe, in maybe the last decade or so, some of these artists may not be ones that you are familiar with. I urge you to go back and see more of their work, because what you'll see, and I've come to appreciate this more and more as I've gotten older, is the artists today in some way are influenced by this talent. So there's multiple generations along the way that have touched our artists. So there's some artists today that don't know they were influenced by these artists, meaning that they were maybe the immediate generation before was the ones, because I look back and I'm like, I'm trying to act like this was the previous generation. It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these artists were, really, they influenced another generation that has influenced today's generation. So there's a generation or two in between this talent that heavily influenced. But you can see a lot of the artistic influences today coming from these giants that are in this particular book. This book really contains like a who's who. This story is really good. The Atom was a character as a kid. I mentioned flea markets. Atom issues were always invariably in there. They were old 60s Atom issues, and it was a chance to kind of, I think it was 60s. They were early Atom issues. I'd have to go back and see. But I read an issue here and there of the Atom. I also remember there being a cartoon that looked more like it was a comic book in its presentation. It was Filmation's cartoon at the time. It was Filmation's Atom. Did you ever see any of those?
No, not at all.
So Filmation did them, and I have the set of them. Filmation did some DC heroes. One of them that they did was the Atom. Ray Palmer is the Atom. It's actually some of the bullets that I've put together over the years for the show. I have some Atom bullets that I've ended up using over the years for the podcast when we had a DC focus. And I took little sound bites from those old Filmation cartoons for that. Ray Palmer, the Atom. Filmation really did some very good animation back in the day. I knew the Atom a lot more from those flea market runs and, more importantly, the Filmation cartoons, which were really, really good. Filmation is, we could almost do a podcast episode on the impact of Filmation on what they did as far as superhero and pop culture back in the day. And this is a great example of it. Seeing the Atom and Ray Palmer, and he's a character I always dug. Seeing him with Green Lantern here, thinking of these two as buddies. I always remember the two of them being kind of like paired up in buddy sequences. Seeing these two together, where right now Hal doesn't know Ray because he's back in that era. And the idea of Ray being able to flatten Hal, boy, Green Lanterns like to take a punch, don't they?
Yes.
I mean, there seems to be a thing of either they're punching Batman or they're getting punched.
Yes.
That was a great, beautiful Gil Kane sequence where Ray was using I always liked that about Atom's power, where yes, he's shrunk, but he's able to use weight and mass because of being able to adjust that through, where it's sometimes surprising the jump he can get on you with what he's able to do with changing the size and shape and use of mass. I really enjoyed the Ray Palmer stories because of that.
Yeah, and it's funny because I loved how, again, traveling through the phone line is always a cool thing. We've seen that multiple times throughout the stories, and again, I go back to the Blackest Night story where Ray Palmer goes through the phone line, goes to the police station. You tell him the Justice League is on this, and it's like that sequence still runs through my head as being one of those really cool, hero moments.
Yes.
So seeing it here again, it's something he's always done, but it is just a really neat moment. And I love the fact that it was this general who said, "Hey, my country's in danger. I have to step up and I have to do this." And he's flying the plane to get to take the Atom to the sequence instead of having just ordering somebody to go. He recognizes the level, and I love the fact that they gave this character, who he's never going to appear in a comic again, that one panel to actually, those two panels to actually just express who this guy is about. That's something I love in a really cool story, where they let the minor characters who aren't even really a character, they're just a little extra add-on piece. They very easily could have had this been just any other person. They're like, no, we're going to take a panel or two to just give this guy some substance. And I love seeing that. And also adding to the fact that Ray was able to sucker punch Green Lantern like this was because, again, it's that single focus on digging up the meteorite. He's solely focused on that he's not looking around him and he's not recognizing any other threat coming down at him. If this had been if he had been full control of his factions, he would have recognized that they bailed out. He would have recognized that the threat hasn't been neutralized. I love that little extra attention to detail in story, but also in artwork. The look on Hal's face as he's saying, without any more distractions, is perfect because it does show him it shows Ray coming in from the background, which is cool, but also does show just kind of like the cluelessness on his face that he's so focused on digging his hole. He's so focused on getting the meteorite piece. It really does add to the mind control stuff. Little choices made in this sequence furthered on the story. I love that.
Yeah, I did too. The interesting little attention to details when Hal's digging up the meteorite. I like that it was in pieces.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't one thing. There's a significant passage of time here, and because of the battle that they went through and everything that went down, I could see them being in different states. I liked that detail. I also liked the way that Ray escaped, shrinking to the microscopic size and digging through the molecules and really going into a whole different kind of world, and then coming back into our world. I thought that part was really neat and led to his way of being able to escape what was going on. As the heroes were failing, the idea that they went back to report to the team so that way they could use the shared intel to try and figure out how do we respond to this now? Because they're dealing with the top tiered. Before we go into, and this is, talk about a classic Flash artist, Carmine Infantino. The Flash versus Elongated Man. This was really, really cool because these are two characters that Carmine Infantino really would be touching on quite a bit because of the partnership between the two. And seeing Barry Allen in this piece, and this just made me giddy. I think it's a beautiful art piece. And I always love seeing the Flash speed effects, and I thought this was something that stood out really well in this art sequence with Chapter 5. Oh,
God, yeah. And I'm just nodding my head on everything you said. Just one, the look of the book. Two, I love seeing, Ralph going up against Barry. It was just a great fight sequence on how Elongated Man would fight the Flash.
Yeah.
Again, fighting, it's difficult to fight the Flash just because of that sheer speed, because of all the goofy stuff that he can do with vibrating his molecules, with Crick, making the big giant crevice in the earth that swallows Ralph up. And Ralph is not done yet. That's not taking him down. He's going to keep going forward and forward. It's one of the things that I really loved about Ralph when I finally found out who this guy was. This is that hero moment where he does not lay down. If you want to stop him, you're going to have to throw everything you have at him to take him out. And we see that, Barry has to do some serious, flashery with him to take him down. Right? Yes. Yeah. I loved seeing it's the hero and Ralph that I absolutely love seeing. And this was a great usage, but also it does show that singular focus of these heroes under control and how much they got to get. He's like, he could have done more damage, but no, he's out. Get the meteor. I'm done. I'm gone. Takes off. And I love that.
You're now the friend of Flashery.
Yeah.
Flashery is a new one. I really like Ralph in these sequences because he is a character who I've grown to really love. And when you see him like this is when you start to realize he is not Plastic Man light. He's his own unique character. So I've actually really enjoyed when we've gotten to see Plastic Man and Elongated Man team up because I think that's where you get to see more of the differences and distinctions between the two in all the right ways. This piece where, he gets thrown down the crevice, and that's not enough to stop Ralph. Ralph is able to stretch and be able to take advantage of this piece. Barry would be a known quantity for him. So he's going up against somebody who, yes, is an incredibly powerful opponent, but somebody that Ralph knows. And I like that it wasn't just a very simple, even though Barry does take him down and Barry does defeat him, I like that it wasn't a simple battle for Barry. That part really, I thought, made for a particular piece. Flash using that spinning technique where he got to dig into the ground and get the meteor, I thought was a really great ending of that sequence. This is also a great time to shift to what is happening with these heroes now that they're gathering these things. Because we hadn't really seen any of this. We'd seen them go up against our current Justice League and the fact that they're winning, but we haven't seen them combine together and even how they're feeling about this. Like, are they noticing that anything's going on? They're starting to pick up pieces like the odd nature of Wonder Woman's costume, these characters that are trying to stop them, the headquarters. Why is it in ruins? And dust everywhere and things like that and decay. That piece was really interesting. They've got clues here that aren't adding up to them. I liked seeing that. This was, at this point, this page was really needed for me.
Oh, God, yeah. And again, I love the fact that they're not just mindless zombies. They're still the heroes, and they've got this mind control going on that they're forcing them to do this, but they're still the Justice League. There's still heroes in there. And again, this page gives you hope that the heroes are going to snap out of it. And it's going to eventually happen, but this was a nice introduction to the return of the hero.
Yeah. That part really was exciting for me. Green Arrow and Black Canary versus Batman with art by Brian Boland. And I got a compliment on the coloring work by Adrian Roy in multiple sequences throughout this one, because you're now responding to different art styles, really trying to emphasize them. This is pre-Killing Joke, Batman, and by Brian Boland. And it was great to see him with doing this Green Arrow and Black Canary versus the Batman. That sequence, the page leading up to it, obviously everything in the beginning of chapter 6, where they're hunting down Batman, but Batman watching them from the shadows. And that page where you flip it over and you see the Batman was such a beautiful page.
Dude, man, I'm just like, yes. And you flip that page, that right there is a poster. That should be a poster. 100%. I love the look of that. And again, this is not just the art team. This is not just pencils, inks, but the coloring as well on this one. I'm so glad you threw out Adrian Roy's name, as an extra, just kudos, because this page right here has that pop of energy. Even though Batman operates out of the shadows, you can still do that pop. You can still give him that energy. And I love that.
The beauty of this whole thing is the whole sequence where Batman going up against Arrow and Canary, some accidental things that happen. Like Batman taking down Ollie. The accidental piece was he shot Ollie's aim off, which caused the bounce off the tree bouncing into Canary's head. Again, using a rubber arrow because of the fact that this was his friend. That was really... I loved that little attention to detail. This was a rubber-tipped arrow. It's still going to do damage. It's still going to take you down, but it's not going to. It's not a kill shot.
Right. Now, you said accidental. Are you sure? Are you sure that the Bat didn't, do that intentionally?
It says Fate 2 provides a helping hand.
Okay.
I mean, the dialogue says it in of itself.
Okay. Because I'll be honest with you, I was like,
I don't think Batman was directing the arrow, though. I mean, it wasn't, he took down Ollie, which threw off Ollie's aim. And it says right here, Fate 2 provides a helping hand. I think you're given... Wait, listen. Batman's got a lot of skills. He knew to take Ollie down so that way he doesn't get shot, which was the immediate concern. The Black Canary piece was a happy accident.
Yes, the dialogue says Fate 2 provides a helping hand, but I always... it's the Batman. He plans for everything. He could have very easily known that if I hit Ollie this way, the arrow will reflect off the tree and hit her. He could have done it. It's Batman.
You're dealing with a different era of Batman here.
Oh, okay.
I mean, don't get me wrong. He's Batman, the Dark Knight detective, and everything like that. But Batman has become more and more superhuman as time has gone on. With his skill set. This was a very competent Batman. Obviously, he took both of them down. The whole handcuff thing that he did was a good piece. That piece was truly, I do believe, the Fate piece of the dialogue. I think the writer was basically telling us, hey, this wasn't planned.
Yeah, I know.
I loved it, though. And I'm with you on Batman. Well, here's the thing. I'm referencing the dialogue because I was looking for an explanation. So I don't know that we're that. I should clarify. We're not far off. You don't look for dialogue like that unless you're questioning, right? So we're on the same place as far as it is Batman. I mean, like, so I looked for the dialogue for a reason. So let me pull back and clarify and give you props on that one, because we're not like on different planets here. I liked afterwards the way Canary was using some of the arrows because she would know Ollie's arsenal to help Ollie escape, that leading to another confrontation with Batman. But that Batman, this is where he's the Batman you're talking about. He knew they'd be coming up on him, and he needed to buy himself time. So what he did was he got the meteor and then left a dummy on the ground for them to waste time with so that he could get away. It was such a great sequence there. I loved that detail, because that's the strategy part you were talking about before. We do get it in this story right there with what he left them on the field waiting for them. So did he take off his cowl and just leave it there? And then
he's got to have a spare.
Yeah. I don't know.
Or something.
Yeah.
Because he obviously took a jet or something to get there.
Sure.
Which we don't see. So in the jet, there's got to be a fresh cowl for him. So maybe he's got an under mask so that he could take off the cowl, leave his cowl that he's currently wearing. So he's got the under mask on. And then when he gets into the plane, he puts his regular cowl. He puts a new cowl on.
The Bat Jet's got to have extra outfits in there, because it is the same Bat Jet we saw earlier. I'm sure that when he pulled the kryptonite away from Superman way back in the past, I'm sure he's got a similar, if not the same one, a similar Bat Jet. This continued exploration now of both teams was great, because now that we've got a little bit more of the mystery unfolding, we've got Team Arrow and we've got Team Originals really analyzing the situation from two angles. And I really like that both of them are seeing mysteries revolving before unfolding before them, and they're trying to kind of resolve them. Because Batman's even saying, there's things I don't understand, and then Martian Manhunter's pointing out that the meteors are beginning to glow. The Justice League current team getting very frustrated over the fact that their efforts are not leading to a payoff. I'm going to be honest with you. The next page over there, this is where I'm going to get Hawkman defensive. Joe Kubert, Hawkman artwork in this Justice League piece.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, is that gorgeous. Him pulling out the various weapons and arsenal pieces as he's going out after Superman. This is a battle. Hawkman's going to lose because everyone else is losing, right? But the winners are us, because we get to see this artwork in this battle.
Yeah.
Where he knew he was going up against the Superman robots. So he walked in with a strategic plan in mind for what he thought he was going to encounter. And I really like that this was a Hawkman that was prepared for the fact that I'm going to have to take out some robots first before I get to the man himself. I loved every bit of this. The battle sequence was great. It's beautiful artwork, great action. The use of the nets in combination with... I love when they highlight... We saw it with this previous one with Brian Boland highlighting the Black Canary, Batman, Green Arrow battle, which was very unique. This is very unique. Joe Kubert getting a chance to really highlight what it means to go to battle between Hawkman and Superman, where they're fighting in the sky, using weapons from various different eras. This is Hawkman's skill set. It was a very, very cool battle until the Man of Steel shows up. And that page was so great when you get to that page 49, that flip, and you see, wait, this is no longer a robot? That was so great.
Dude, I'll tell you, one of the things I do love, and we've seen it in prior stories with Hawkman, is how he can travel far distances using the parabolic arch of the Earth. Yeah. So he goes in the upper atmosphere, then comes back down. So it reduces hours to minutes. And I love every time we've seen that in the story with him, and I'm like, that is actually a cool way to explain it. And it's a neat thing to have, again, nice little sciencey thing in there. And I agree completely with you on the fight sequences when he's fighting the robots and he's taking them down. And he knew Soup would have to send the robots because of the kryptonite.
Yes.
And again, it does show why they only sent.
Except. We'll have to talk about that because Superman prepared for the kryptonite.
Well, but that's the thing. I liked why they only sent, because again, I said before, if it was me on the team, I would have sent Firestorm with Hawkman.
Yes.
And had 2 people on Superman. This kind of explains why they would only send 1 person, because they're thinking it's going to be robots and not planning for, Superman to have a clear lead lining that he could use on his suit to protect him from the kryptonite, which, again, is a neat thing to have with him.
Not just his suit, his body.
His body, right.
Does that cover his eyes then, too?
Yeah, it's clear, so he can see through it. Plus, he also has X-ray vision, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He could be in a solid suit, and he'd be still fine.
So, if I'm Superman, why wouldn't I always wear that?
I don't know. That's the thing that got me thinking. Now, I remember once, I can't remember what story it was, but there was a Superman story where he explained why he doesn't wear, like, an extra armor type of thing to protect him from kryptonite. And basically the explanation was he needed to be seen as
human
and vulnerable and have that hanging over his head for people to not be afraid of him and think of him as some all-powerful god. And I don't remember where that story was in, but I do remember there was some type of explanation and I don't even remember who brought it up to him and asked him about it. But I do remember somewhere in my readings of something where he gave some type of explanation where he needs to be seen as more human, for people not to be afraid of him. One of the things I do love about this notion of the clear lead covering, Superman, it's the plastic lead alloy that's so pure it's almost transparent. I love the artistic usage. You can kind of see, the reflection and the shimmer on him, to let us know that it's actually there now. When they first introduced it and all that, it's, again, neat little art usage there just to add to the story and say, yeah, see, you can kind of see the little shimmer there, especially when he's picking up the meteorite and flying away. It kind of has a little bit of a glisten to him. So it's adding to the story. And it again, art and writing working together is always a cool thing. And speaking of art and writing working together, I honestly really loved the Hawkman punch. The punch that Soup gave to Hawkman, because they're above ground, and then he knocks him out and just sends him flying up and up and up. And I loved how they did the drifting alone at the very edge of Earth's atmosphere, carried by sheer momentum, impacting by Superman's punch to a point high over southern latitudes. One moment, he's beginning the long descent back down to Earth. So I love the fact that the story made sure, the writing made sure to let us know he never left the atmosphere. Because the way the artwork is, you could actually think, it makes you think maybe he's actually in space already. No, he's just at the very edge of it. Which, again, that was a really cool usage of, the art team showing it, the writing, showing it, everything just to keep him why he's not in outer space. He's just at the very tippy top edge of the atmosphere. And I loved how they did that, with him. And then he gets picked up by the Zeta beam. It was a great, beautiful panel, great writing and artwork, working together here. I loved this page.
When Hawkman's drifting and the Zeta beam piece picks him up, I loved, you mentioned the artwork. I want to highlight again, I loved the fact that they created motion. So you got the tiny Hawkman drifting in, and you see his body floating and twisting, and you just recognize this man's going to die unless something happens. I'm a big Adam Strange fan. And I wasn't always. I remember Adam Strange as a kid, like I remember him most from like Brave and the Bold, or really more so DC Comics Present. There was a story of Superman and Adam Strange from that was really more of my introduction between the two. What I loved about this was they brought him and Alana into this piece. But I like that there's this urgency. We got to get Hawkman out of here because there's a political problem here. He's Thanagarian. He should not be here. And I thought that was really a great attention to detail, just to have that political piece in there. It's really smart writing.
Oh God, yeah. And again, Adam Strange, again, 52 was my introduction to him. So yeah. I didn't know who he was from Adam, no pun intended. And I love the fact that as we've done this show, I've learned who this guy is. I understand everything. And again, with seeing the Thanagarian get picked up, because this is Qatar Hall. Yeah. This is the Thanagarian space cop. So I love the fact that knowing that Rand can't have a Thanagarian on there. And I didn't know where this was with the Rand-Thanagar War, or how far this was before or after or any of that stuff. So I love the fact that they put him in, got him out of there, and got him as close as they could to the satellite. Said, this is the best we can do. Good luck.
Yeah, I loved everything about this whole storyline. Again, this is another chance for the team. Ralph's got to now stretch farther than he's ever stretched before in order to bring Hawkman in. I liked the sense of urgency to saving the life of their teammate.
Yep.
In that situation. There was something really cool about this whole thing. And again, now it's this team again reflecting on this defeat and where do we go from here? Those pieces were all things I just thought really added a sense of danger and excitement to this story that was something I didn't know I needed. But man, now that we have it, it was something that stood out for me.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, and again, this was a really cool, team moment. And that's something they've been really emphasizing on this, that the Justice League, whether it's the old or the new, survive better when they fight as a team. They did solo fights before, and that's why they lost. Now they need to come together as a team. They need to work together to defeat this. And I love this. That notion is really starting to build up now within the team. Yeah. That's what we need to have going on here. It's the, this is the, they got knocked down. What happens when you get knocked down? You pick yourself back up. And I loved seeing just the Justice League come together. And I love finally when we get the original team get snapped out of it. And they start figuring out what's going on here. Because before this, they had all the worries, had all the, hey, this is going on. What's going on? I don't know why. The memory lapses, the little things, the mysteries that start to drive them nuts. And finally, we get that moment where they get their aha moment where they realize what's going on. This was, again, great timing on how the pacing and the layout for this book. Where you keep getting these little bits, and bam, now is the time the heroes recognize what's going on.
Yeah, everything about that worked. And that was something that I really enjoyed. Hal and the team, as now they've gathered all the pieces together and we're starting to see the hatching of the clones. Hal's memory coming back, all of their memories coming back on what happened, because now the hypnotism, we're starting to realize what happened. They years ago, when this all happened, they hypnotized the team. Knowing that they were ultimately going to lose, they put a backup plan where they put clones in there. They're not actually the real opponents, the original opponents. They are clones of those opponents who have the memories of those opponents. I really liked this. I was like, oh, wow, this is... So the Justice League really did defeat them. They saw the potential of their defeat, and they provided accordingly a way to handle it. I thought everything about this just worked brilliantly. And stood out to me as just being just a really fun story.
Yeah, it was a neat explanation. We knew something was going on, and I love the fact that we get this little extra bit. And the stuff in this thing you said about the seeds and the clones, I loved that part of it because I wasn't thinking that at all. I was thinking, okay, This is them. They're just reborn or something. Like, no, they actually say, no, it's the seed. We can, conceal seed clones of ourselves in there. So it was the originals they were fighting, and I like that little attention to detail that they put in there, and I was glad to see that.
When they take down the original League, they've had time to plan for them. They know what happened with their original defeat. So now they're reacting differently than they did before, having different dance partners in certain cases in order to make sure that goes the way that it did. It was something that was great. Knowing how to take out Superman, but then accounting for Martian Manhunter, taking care of Green Lantern with the sound waves, and then Batman being taken down, but Aquaman being drained of water. Those pieces were all really cool. And Diana's last thoughts before she gets knocked out is an apology to her mom, which I thought was really a neat little attention to detail in the dialogue. This would be something that would still be kind of harming her at this point, recognizing now that her memory's back, she recognizes the mistakes that she made. I thought that was really cool. Leading to the page where now that they've been recovered, they wake up to seeing the new league before them. I love that it's Ollie with an arrow pointing right at Batman.
Yep.
And wait, that is not a rubber-tipped arrow.
No, that's a point. That's a broadhead. Ollie's not taking any chances this time.
I thought that was really, really cool. The page with the entire team running together, both the old and the new, that's the Justice League to me.
Yeah.
It was an interesting dig on the Avengers. Did you catch that dialogue bit?
They do not need a battle. They have no battle cry, nor do they need one. Yeah.
Which the only way I could say that is that had to be a dig on the Avengers, right?
Oh yeah. And here's the funny thing: I've often said, I wish the Justice League had something because you got Titans together, you had Avengers assemble. I do like that, but I like this little dig right there. Now,
what would you say? Justice League jolliness? I mean, what would your
I lack the intelligence to come up with a good Justice League battle cry.
Leaguers liquidate? I mean, it's just none of them work.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I have no. I'm not even going to throw out a jokey one because I have no idea. Again, depending on which league it is. If it was the Bwahaha League, I would probably do something more campier. But actually, if it's Guy Gardner, I'd have Guy Gardner say, "Come get some."
Yeah. Yes. I liked the line. Here's the thing. Maybe historically, I'm trying to think back. There may have been in one of the versions of the Justice League some form of rally cry. I think in this one, it fits though with just this particular squad. Yeah. The way that they laid it out. I thought it was just intriguing the way that they did it. I like that for they are the Justice League, and that is just such a great shot. Talk about your posters. That's a ready-made poster right there.
Oh God, yeah.
Now. Chapter 8, when you take a look at Chapter 8, I want to be a part of this squad. Because later on, they're kind of like, oh, you 3 go off together, or you 4 go off together. They took 7 people for the first attack. I mean, it was, and it's the only group where they did that. I want to be a part of this team. Because on that team, let's take a look at the heavy hitters you've got there. You've got Superman, you've got Wonder Woman, you've got Zatanna, you've got Hawkman. Over there. And on top of it, you've got the mental prowess of Batman and the physical, obviously, but you've got Green Arrow and Black Canary. Like, that's the squad to be a part of, right? It's like, guys, don't you need somebody else? I think, I'll be your 8th. Do you need a pilot or something? Like Batman's plane? What's Batman going to do like when he has to get out and, combat? I'm happy to help you however you want. You need somebody in the invisible jet? You tell me what you guys need. I loved everything about this sequence. The Batjet's perfect in this. I really love the Batjet when you get to see it. This era, I got so used to like the Batwing, being a thing. I forgot how cool Batman's jets are when you get to see them. That is a very cool jet.
Yeah. He's got all the neat toys. And again, we talk about changes he makes to the costume, the Batmobile, any of his vehicles. He has, throughout the era, the different years of Batman, he's always had cool toys. He's always had cool. And I always chuckle when Green Arrow has some of his stuff. It's neat, but it's never as cool as the Bat stuff.
Right.
The Aeromobile isn't as good as the Batmobile, and just like his plane is, it's never as cool. And even this era Batmobile, I like more of the one that looks kind of like the Symbol. That I like that version of the Batplane the best, but this is still looks really wicked.
Yeah, I agree with you. So they're going on and they're fighting the trees and the diamond shape one. I really liked seeing how they teamed up together to handle that sequence. I liked that they're going in under certain assumptions. Superman goes in there and smashes open. Now, what happened to his lead-lined suit? Like, why isn't he wearing it now?
I don't know. He took it off? Why? I don't get it.
Like, it seems ill-advised.
Took it off him when they beat him?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why he did that.
Yeah, like, I don't understand his logic here. The whole sequence with, and I loved that Arrow was the one that saved Hawkman.
Yeah.
Just considering their past history together, it's nice to see those two working together. Everything about the battle I loved. I thought it was a really great battle, seeing how the team was working together and how every member had a function in there. And I think that's part of the reason, from a storytelling standpoint. Like, if you've got Superman with that lead-lined suit on, you don't really need any of those other people there at all.
Yes.
He could have taken care of it. I think that's ultimately the answer to it, is that you needed Superman to have some form of weakness, so that way the other people were needed. But that squad, man, did they nail that.
Oh, this right here is a Justice League on its own.
Yeah. That
right there is an all-star Justice League. So just that one squad, could take down anything. And again, like you said, I really digged, the usage of the team and how they, how they came together. The Green Arrow sequence was a really cool one. And again, the Zatanna one, taking out the Mercury creature. That was another neat one. Again, took a lot of trying to figure out what exactly she was, her spell was, but that was a really detailed spell. Yeah. So that was kind of cool.
Chapter 9, where we got to see Aquaman, Elongated Man, The Flash, and Red Tornado. These pieces we're back dealing with the characters that would be most vulnerable to water-based solutions. I thought it was great to see Aquaman in his element, showing his strength, where, he breaks that glass based one of the villains, and we get to see the fire. I like that they were turning on each other too, because this is the point where they were vying for who was going to be emperor, and I liked how his Flame Lord buddy didn't help him out.
No.
And he starts yelling betrayed. That's it. When they were working together as a team and a unit, they were taking down the Justice League. And they probably could have continued down that pathway if they hadn't gotten okay, we wiped them out now, let's fight each other. It certainly didn't serve them well.
Well, it's your typical villain stuff where the villains aren't going to always work together. And the heroes will be the team up, and they'll be a team, and that's the team dynamic is what does it. Red Tornado's handling of the Fire Lord was really cool. Where he's like, I swore never to take a life, but this thing was never alive and cannot die. So all bets are off on this one. Yeah. It was a great chapter. Another good usage of Ralph.
Yes.
Being the antagonist to try to get to throw the guy off, to give Tornado the chance to put the vortex on him. So again, nice, really cool usage of Ralph there.
And Black Canary did that similarly in the previous chapter, where she was, she has powers, but in that particular scenario, it made sense for her to be the human target, so that way she could count on her teammates to be able to take advantage of the distraction. It was a good use of team effort in this. That's where you really trust your teammates, when you're willing to take the hits, or put yourself in the line of fire in order for them to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. Chapter 10, we got the Atom, Firestorm, Green Lantern, and Martian Manhunter. This is a pretty good squad. Yeah. If you're going into battle, this is a team that I wouldn't mind. I'm with the Atom. If I'm going to be on the shoulder of somebody, I want it to be when I'm with this particular squad, because that's some heavy hitters.
Yes. Oh, dude. Again, I like this team. I like this layout. You got a nice variety of heavy hitters. You've got some thinkers. You've got some, you got a lantern. So that's always a plus. So it was kind of neat. Now, I always chuckle that the lantern always ends up fighting the yellow monster. And he always has problems with that. I'm like, they could have switched him off for one of the other teams and send somebody else on this one, to deal with the yellow monster. But I don't know.
Remember, he took out the Rocky one, though.
Right.
And actually scoops the whole thing up. So he was actually, when they divided and conquered properly, he actually was incredibly useful on this mission and taking care of the Rocky one, where he'd use the jackhammer to destroy him, and then he's basically getting rid of the chunks afterwards.
Yep.
It was an intriguing little battle that was down there. I was mentioned earlier, the current Justice League book. It kind of does stuff like this, but we have squads going on whole different missions, if that makes sense. So it's not just them splitting off to handle one big threat. they'll have squads sometimes dealing with a whole different story arc within the team, because they can't be all in multiple places at one time. So, hey, you take this squad and go over there. We'll take this squad and we'll go over here and handle this piece. That part is something that I'm really enjoying about the Justice League Unlimited book. The Atom used in the canon, I thought was really interesting, where it kind of goes off of the whole distraction piece, right? They shot the Atom to be a distraction so that way they could take advantage of it. And I like how Ray's kind of like, I hope, wait, they shot him out as a cannon, not 100% knowing what it was going to do to him.
Man to a man, am I going to have a headache?
Yes. I mean, that part, I'm like, wait a minute. Did they just do that? They kind of did. Like, they basically said, hey, Ray, I don't know, out of the three of us, you're kind of the most expendable at the moment. Let's use you as a projectile. I did like the solution at the end of throwing everything into the sun.
Yeah.
You know, as far as let's just decimate all this stuff now, so hopefully it doesn't happen again. As we know in comics, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that nothing's going to happen. But I thought that was an elegant solution to take advantage of kind of wrapping everything up. Let's not bury things and separate it again.
Yeah.
The concluding sequence where, you know, we've got people like Martian Manhunter who are going back and, you know, to the second Mars right now. So that takes him off the team. But Ollie being invited back to the team and the team saying that they need him, I thought was a really good ending of this. Put him back on the Satellite Era Justice League squad. And it was great to see him back again. I always love Ollie on the Justice League. Makes a lot of sense. In many ways, he's kind of the conscious, or at least the conscious objector, which I think is a good thing for this story. I started reading issue 201 because I was enjoying this so much, just to see where this new team goes. And it is worth continuing on and reading in this. That's an anniversary issue that does this, that like tells a complete story, but leaves you at the end with a new status quo for the team moving forward. I think is something that's always important with these issues, right? It should be done in one, you know, where you can be satisfied with, you felt like you had an epic story, but you should also have a reason to want to, like, you don't want the exclamation point of, well, I'm kind of done with Justice League now. That doesn't fit with the monthly title, but I liked how this did the appropriate thing. It got me reading, and I would recommend issue 201. It's a very good story. I'm glad we got to talk about Justice League on this.
Me too.
It's been a minute.
This was a good call. Yeah.
Now I can get out of here.
RagingBullets.com is our show website. That's where you'll find information on upcoming episodes. In our show notes and on our page, there is actually a Google form for show episode ideas. We would love to get your feedback on what you'd like to see us do in the future. The website does feed into Twitter. /X. It also feeds into our Facebook fan page. Great way to connect with us and find out what's going on with the podcast. We are proud to be part of a great Facebook group community. And I want to thank everyone who posts news articles and blog updates and just topical information that they're finding out there. To me, it's one of the areas where I go first to find out what kind of things are going on in the world of comics. A lot of times they'll post trailers for movies, just different updates on like when Diamond was going through its bankruptcy. What does that mean for some of the comic companies? I just really appreciate anyone that's curating news there and sharing those for topical purposes. It's also where every single show episode is posted. And if you have any comments, feel free to put them there. RagingBullets@gmail.com is our email address. You can send us audio comments there. We are going to be setting up another voicemail line. I haven't had a chance to do it yet. We are working out how we're going to be handling recording moving forward because we used to do it all through Skype, and that is being deprecated. So when we get everything stabilized with our new platform, I'll then move over to making sure if that platform does not have a phone number option, I will get something in place so that way you can leave us voicemail comments. But for now, continue to use RagingBullets@gmail.com and just send us an audio comment. We're happy to include it in the show and love having your thoughts as part of the podcasts. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Mr. Seglin, what is going on over at DCBService.com?
Remember, DCBS is an actual comic shop, so they have what they're normally listed every month, but they also have these back issues. So feel free to use their search engine. It's absolutely easy to use. Even I can do it. just did a quick search on Batman, and I'm seeing pop action figures. I'm seeing a replica automobile, the Batmobile from Batman Forever, and a lot of variant covers. So if you're a variant cover fan like I am, this is a great way to find them. Thank you, DCBS.
You know what I start doing with variant covers, not to mention that, especially when I go to I order them. I'll order some special ones. Like I got that William Shatner World's Finest one, which was cool. They had, at the Fan Expo that I went to, they had 2 Mark Hamill variant covers that was over there. When I get themed ones that I really like, I get them signed whenever possible. So they're great things to hold on to and get signed at conventions. But the other piece that's really, in particular, cool about them is there's a lot of comic frames that are out there. And I found some comic book frames on Amazon.com. I framed some of the variant covers just because I like them so much. Instead of them sitting in my comic box, they look great on the wall.
Yes, yeah.
Especially with a nice framing option out there. So if you haven't done that before, I encourage you to take some of your favorite variants or your favorite covers in general and do try to get them signed if you'd like to, and throw them up there. I really enjoy the experience of just having that artwork on my wall. And they're great conversation pieces for people, whether they're comic fans or not. Usually those covers are really eye-catching and do lead to some cool conversation pieces. InStockTrades.com is where you can check out the deals of the week. DC's finest Peacemaker Kill for Peace trade paperback, $39.99 regularly, 55% off, only $17.99. Fable Omnibus Graphic Novel Volume 7, $22.99 regularly, 45% off, only $12.64. Jimmy Olsen's Super Cyclopedia trade paperback, $12.99 regularly, 50% off, only $6.49. And of course, 2 different versions of Marvel Masterworks Avengers West Coast hardcover, Volume 1, 75% regularly, 46% off, only $40.50. I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for supporting our show. Also, check out the About Us section of our show website. That's where you can connect with us on personal social media and gaming platforms. You can get links to Is It Jaws, which is a podcast that Paul Spataro is kind enough to ask me to co-host. We do film reviews based on the Jaws 1 through 4 scale, so if you're a film fan, please consider checking us out over there. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be back with part 2 of this anniversary celebration, where we take a look at the Marvel side of things with Fantastic Four number 300 and Avengers 400. We will see you then.
Bye!
When Sean and Jim decided long ago to do a weekly comic book podcast show, they started slowly, then grew strong. To listen now, you can't go wrong. The Raging Bullets Comics Podcast Show.